The alley smelled like wet garbage and old beer when the first punch landed. Aria Bennett hit the brick wall so hard her teeth clacked together, and somewhere above her, past the ringing in her ears, past the wheeze of her own breath, she heard her ex laughing. Not a loud laugh, a small one. The kind a man makes when he's already decided how the night ends. Her hand clawed at the concrete. Her nephew was waiting for her 3 blocks away in a diner booth. A 6-year-old boy who hadn't spoken in a year, and she was going to die here. Then headlights. Before we go any further, if you're watching this, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and tell me in the comments what city you're tuning in from. I want to see how far this story travels. Stay with me all the way to the end, because what happens in the next 2 hours is going to stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Let's begin. The diner on Fulton Street had a neon sign that only half worked, so at night it read OPE instead of open, and most of the regulars thought that was funnier than it had any right to be. Aria Bennett had been working the graveyard shift there for 11 months, and she could tell you exactly which booth springs were broken, which tiles on the floor tilted when you stepped on them wrong, and which customers tipped in quarters they'd dug out of their car ashtrays. She could also tell you, down to the minute, how long it had been since her sister died. 14 months, 3 weeks, 2 days. The math lived in her body now. It sat behind her ribs when she poured coffee. It pressed against her throat when she smiled at truckers who called her sweetheart. It woke up with her at 4 in the afternoon in the apartment above the laundromat, and it went to sleep with her at 8 in the morning after she'd walked Ethan to the bus stop with her eyes burning from no sleep. Tonight it was raining. Not hard. The kind of rain that just hangs in the air and makes everything smell like wet asphalt and exhaust. Aria tied her apron around her waist and checked the clock above the register. 10:17. "You look like hell, Bennett." Marco was the line cook, a 40-something Dominican guy with a burn scar running from his wrist to his elbow and a daughter in college he never shut up about. He slid a plate of scrambled eggs across the pass. "For you. Eat something before you fall over." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're vertical. Those are different things." Aria took the plate because arguing with Marco was like arguing with a wall that loved you. She ate standing up by the coffee machine, watching the rain smear the window, and for a second, just a second, she let herself pretend that this was her whole life. Eggs, rain, a kitchen that smelled like bacon grease, a boss who yelled in Spanish at the radio when the Yankees lost. It wasn't a good life, but it was a quiet one. Then her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, and the quiet cracked in half. Unknown number. She knew who it was before she answered. She always knew. It had been 8 days since the last call, which meant he was sober enough to find a new burner phone but drunk enough to use it. She stepped out the back door into the alley, into the rain. "Don't call this number again, Derek." "Where's my son?" "Yeah." His voice was slurred around the edges, wet in the mouth, the way it got when he'd been drinking something brown. Aria closed her eyes. Her free hand found the brick wall behind her and pressed flat against it, like she needed something to hold her up. "He's not your son. He's my blood. He's your nephew, and he's not yours. He was never yours. Maggie gave custody to me. You know that. The court knows that. Stop calling me. I don't give a damn what the court knows. You think some piece of paper, Derek, some piece of paper from some fat judge in a black robe is going to keep me from my family? You stole him, Aria. You stole him from me. Maggie was my sister, too. Maggie is dead because of you." She hadn't meant to say it. She'd sworn to herself she wouldn't say it. But it was out now, hanging in the wet air like smoke, and she couldn't pull it back. The line went quiet. For a long second, the only sound was the rain ticking against the dumpster lid and her own heart knocking against her ribs. She could hear him breathing. She could hear a TV on in the background. Some laugh track, some sitcom with an audience that didn't know a man was about to do something terrible. "I'm coming to get him," Derek said, soft. "You hear me? I'm coming to get him, and I'm going to make you watch." He hung up. Aria stood there in the alley for a long time, the phone in her hand, the rain in her hair. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in months. Crying was a thing other people did. People who still had the energy, the spare time, the luxury of a private room with a door that locked. She just stood there, counting her breaths, until Marco knocked on the back door and told her Table 9 needed a refill. She finished her shift. She didn't tell anyone about the call. The Lincoln Park neighborhood was the kind of place real estate agents called transitional, which was a polite way of saying the rent was cheap because the windows got broken sometimes. Aria's building was a 3-story walk-up with a laundromat on the ground floor, a vacant storefront on one side, and a check cashing place on the other. The elevator had been broken since she moved in. The hallway smelled like fabric softener and old cigarettes. She climbed the 2 flights of stairs at 5:15 in the morning, her feet aching in a way that had stopped being temporary about 3 months ago, and she found Mrs. Kowalski asleep on the couch with her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a paperback splayed open on her chest. Mrs. Kowalski was 71, a retired kindergarten teacher, and the only person in the building Aria trusted with Ethan. She babysat for $10 an hour and a plate of whatever Aria cooked on her day off. Most nights she fell asleep before Aria got home, but she never complained. "Hey," Aria whispered, touching her shoulder. "I'm back." The old woman blinked awake and smiled. "He was good. Read 3 books. Drew you a picture." "Did he talk?" The smile slipped just a little. "Not tonight, honey." Aria nodded. She was used to it. It had been a year and 2 months since Ethan had spoken a word out loud. The doctors at the county clinic had a name for it: selective mutism, trauma-induced, and a list of therapies the insurance wouldn't cover. Aria had a different name for it. She called it waiting. Her nephew was waiting. For what? She couldn't say. But he was a quiet, thoughtful child who looked at the world like he was memorizing the exits, and she trusted him to speak when he was ready. She paid Mrs. Kowalski. She walked her to the door. She locked both deadbolts and the chain, and then, because Derek's voice was still sitting in the back of her throat, she pushed the armchair in front of the door too. Ethan was asleep on the pull-out couch in the living room, one arm thrown over a stuffed rabbit that had belonged to his mother when she was little. His hair was getting long. He needed a cut. Aria knelt beside him and pushed a strand off his forehead, and the love she felt for him was so sharp it almost made her dizzy. "I'm coming to get him. I'm going to make you watch." She got up. She went to the kitchen. She opened the drawer under the coffee maker and took out the revolver her father had left her when he died. A .38, old enough that the bluing had worn off the barrel. And she checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. She closed it. She put it back. She didn't know yet that she wouldn't be sleeping in that apartment again. The call came at 9:42 the next night. Aria was on her feet at the diner pouring coffee for a trucker who'd been flirting with her for the last 40 minutes in a way that was almost charming and almost exhausting in equal measure. Her apron pocket buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. She ignored it. The 3rd time, she set the coffee pot down and stepped away from the counter. It was Mrs. Kowalski. The old woman's voice was high and thin, the way people's voices got when they were trying very hard not to panic in front of a child. "Aria, honey, there's a man at the door. He's banging on it. He says he's Ethan's daddy." The floor went soft under Aria's feet. "Don't open it. Mrs. K, listen to me. Do not open it, okay? Take Ethan into the bathroom, lock the door, and call 911. Right now. Can you do that?" "I already called. They said 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Aria yanked her apron off over her head and threw it onto a table. She didn't tell Marco she was leaving. She didn't clock out. She grabbed her keys and her phone, and she was out the back door before the bell above the front door had finished ringing behind the last customer. Her car was a 2009 Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for so long she'd started thinking of it as a friend. It started on the 2nd try. She drove 10 blocks through yellow lights and one very red one, her hands slippery on the wheel, her teeth grinding against each other so hard her jaw ached. She called Mrs. Kowalski 3 times. The line was busy. She called 911 herself. The dispatcher told her a unit had been dispatched. She told the dispatcher that her nephew was in the apartment. She told the dispatcher that her ex had a history. She told the dispatcher that she had a restraining order. The dispatcher told her, in the neutral voice of a person who had said the same words 10,000 times, that a unit had been dispatched. She was 2 blocks away when she saw the flash of red and blue. She parked crooked in front of a fire hydrant and ran. Her feet slapped the wet pavement. Someone, a neighbor, an old man in a bathrobe, stood on the sidewalk with his hand over his mouth. A cop held up a palm and told her to stop, ma'am, and she shoved past him because she heard Ethan crying. Ethan. Crying. out loud. For the first time in 14 months. He was on the landing outside her apartment, clinging to Mrs. Kowalski, and he was making a thin wailing sound that scraped across Aria's nerves like a dull knife. She ran to him. She dropped to her knees on the wet linoleum. She wrapped him in her arms and he buried his face in her shoulder, and he just made that sound. No words yet, just grief in its rawest, loudest form. And Mrs. Kowalski was crying, and the apartment door was splintered down the middle where someone had kicked it, and a cop was standing in her living room writing in a notepad. "He ran," the cop said, without looking up. Neighbor across the hall scared him off with a baseball bat. "We've got a description. We've got a plate." "He was in my home," Aria said. "Ma'am, I understand." "He was in my home with my son." "Ma'am." She didn't realize she was shouting until Ethan flinched in her arms. She stopped. She forced her voice down. She held her nephew and rocked him and whispered nonsense into his hair until the wailing slowed to hitching breaths and then to nothing at all. And then he was silent again, and she hated Derek Wells more in that moment than she had ever hated anyone in her life. The cop told her they'd have a patrol car drive by every hour. He told her to call if she saw anything suspicious. He told her that, statistically, men like Derek usually cooled off after a night like this. He left. Aria sat on the floor of her ruined apartment with her nephew in her lap, and she understood, with a cold clarity that felt almost peaceful, that the police could not save them. She needed to leave. Tonight. She didn't know where. She packed 2 duffel bags. Clothes. Ethan's rabbit. The tin box from under her bed with Maggie's birth certificate, and the custody papers, and $412 in cash. She left the TV. She left the furniture. She left the picture of Maggie on the fridge because her hands were shaking too hard to pull it down without crying. Mrs. Kowalski tried to give her the $200 she had in her purse. Aria wouldn't take it. "Where will you go?" the old woman asked. "Anywhere?" "Aria, a motel tonight. I'll figure out the rest tomorrow." It was a little past midnight when she carried Ethan down the stairs, asleep in her arms, both duffel bags slung over her other shoulder. The rain had started again. Heavier this time, the kind of rain that hissed against the pavement and ran in small rivers along the curb. She got him into the back seat of the Civic. She buckled him in. She stood by the open door for one long moment with her forehead pressed to the cold metal of the roof. And she thought, just for a second, about driving into a bridge abutment with both of them in the car. She straightened up. She closed the door. She drove. The motel she picked was on Route 9, a 2-story L-shaped thing with a flickering vacancy sign and a parking lot full of pickup trucks. The clerk didn't look at her when she paid cash. The room smelled like old cigarettes and something sweeter, chemical. She put Ethan in the bed. She pulled the blankets up to his chin. She sat in the chair by the window with the revolver in her lap, and she watched the parking lot until the sun came up. She did not sleep. At 6 a.m, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She almost threw the phone against the wall. But some small, stupid, hopeful part of her thought, what if it's the police? What if they caught him? So she picked it up. "Thought I wouldn't find you?" Derek's voice. Calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came after a long night of drinking, when a man had crossed over into a place where his hands didn't shake anymore. "How did you—" "I've got eyes, sweetheart. I've always had eyes. You think I didn't know about the old lady downstairs? You think I didn't know about that diner? You think I don't know what kind of car you drive?" Aria looked at the curtained window. The parking lot beyond was a gray smear of rain and light. "I'll call the police." "You go ahead. They'll get there in 20 minutes. I'll be there in 5. He hung up. She was moving before the phone was back in her pocket. She scooped Ethan out of the bed. He made a sleepy noise. No words. Just a noise. And she grabbed the bags, and she was at the door when she realized she had no plan. No plan at all. She had $340 in her pocket. A car with a dying alternator. A child. A gun. And a man who was 5 minutes away. She ran anyway. She drove south because south was the direction the car was already pointing. The rain got worse. The wipers on the Civic couldn't keep up, and the world turned into a watercolor smear of red taillights and yellow street lamps. Ethan was awake in the back seat, silent again, his rabbit pressed against his face. Aria's hands were white on the wheel. She didn't know this part of the city. She'd taken an exit off the highway to lose anyone following her, and now she was on a road she didn't recognize, passing boarded-up buildings and a fenced-off lot full of rusting cars. The clock on the dashboard read 6:47 a.m. The sun should have been up. It wasn't. The storm was too thick. She pulled over behind a closed liquor store to think. She killed the engine. She leaned her forehead against the wheel. Aunt Ari. 2 words, small and hoarse and dry. Aria's head snapped up. She turned in her seat. Ethan was looking at her with his mother's gray eyes, and he was talking. For the second time in a year, he was talking. And he said, "I'm scared." Aria made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. She reached back and grabbed his hand and she said, "Me too, baby. Me too. But I've got you. I've got you, okay?" He nodded. He squeezed her hand. And that was the moment the passenger window exploded. She didn't understand what had happened at first. There was just a crash of sound and a spray of glass. And then the taste of copper in her mouth. And then Derek was in the car, his arm through the broken window, his hand in her hair, yanking her sideways across the center console. Aria screamed. She kicked. Her foot hit the horn, and it blared across the empty lot like an alarm nobody was going to answer. Derek's face was inches from hers, red and wet with rain, his breath like cheap whiskey, and something rotten underneath. "Told you," he was saying, not shouting, just telling her, like they were having a conversation. "Told you I'd find you. Told you." Ethan, run. The back door didn't open. Child lock. She turned on the child lock 2 years ago and never turned it off. Ethan was trapped in the back seat, and his uncle was breaking into the front. And Aria clawed at Derek's arm with her nails, and she reached for the glove compartment where the revolver was, and her fingers brushed the latch, and then his other hand came through the window and hit her across the jaw, and the world went white. She was on the pavement. She didn't remember how. Her face was in a puddle, and the puddle was pink, and Derek had her by the collar of her jacket, and he was dragging her across the asphalt toward the back of a black SUV she hadn't even heard pull up. Her ears were ringing. Ethan was pounding on the inside of the car window and screaming words now, real words. "Leave her alone, leave her alone, leave her alone." And Aria tried to get her feet under her and couldn't. And the alley behind the liquor store was dark and narrow. And no one was coming. No one was coming. No one was... A car door slammed. Somewhere behind them. Derek froze. "The hell?" he said. Aria couldn't see. She was on her side, her cheek against wet pavement, and she could only see Derek's boots and the tire of the SUV. But she heard footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. 2 sets of them. Expensive shoes on a wet surface, the click of leather heels. A voice she didn't know said, "Let go of her." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was the voice of a man who had never in his life needed to be loud to be obeyed. A voice with no edges, smooth as a river stone. An accent buried under a lot of years of being somewhere else. Derek laughed. It was the wrong laugh. It was the laugh of a man who didn't yet understand what he was looking at. "Mind your business, old man." "She is my business now." Aria managed to turn her head. She saw, through the wet strands of her own hair, 2 men at the mouth of the alley. One was enormous, 6.5 feet, built like a refrigerator, a black raincoat hanging off his shoulders. The other was smaller. Not by much. 6'1", maybe. Lean. He was holding a black umbrella over his head with one hand, and the other hand was in the pocket of a dark gray overcoat that looked like it cost more than Aria's car. She couldn't see his face, just a jawline, just the clean line of a cheekbone. "I said," the man repeated, still quiet, still smooth, "let go of her." Derek let go of her collar. Aria's head hit the pavement. She didn't care. She crawled. She got 2 feet before her arms gave out. She lay there, breathing wet gravel, and she watched. Derek pulled a knife out of his jacket. Of course he had a knife. He always had a knife. He flicked it open, and he started walking toward the man with the umbrella. And the man with the umbrella didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even shift. The big man in the raincoat took 1 step forward, and the man with the umbrella raised a single finger, and the big man stopped. "Are you going to use that?" the man with the umbrella asked. Polite, almost curious. "Gonna cut your..." The big man moved. Aria didn't even see it. One moment Derek was taking a step with the knife raised, and the next moment he was on his face on the pavement with his arm twisted up behind his back at an angle arms weren't supposed to go. And the knife was skittering across the asphalt, and he was screaming in a high, thin voice that was almost funny. The man with the umbrella walked over, unhurried. He stepped around Derek without looking at him, and he crouched down in front of Aria, and he tilted his head slightly to one side, studying her. She looked up. She saw his face for the first time. He was maybe 40, maybe a little older. Dark hair combed back from a high forehead, a few threads of silver at the temples. A straight nose, a mouth that didn't smile. Eyes the color of wet slate. Not kind, not cruel, just watching, the way a doctor watches a patient he hasn't diagnosed yet. There was a small scar at the corner of his left eyebrow, pale as a thread. He didn't touch her. "Can you stand?" Aria tried. She couldn't. "The child in the car, is he yours?" "My nephew." He nodded once, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. He turned his head a fraction of an inch. He said a word in a language Aria didn't speak. The big man grunted and bent and picked Derek up off the pavement by the back of his jacket like he was a bag of laundry. "Wait," Aria rasped. She didn't know why she said it. She didn't want Derek near her. She didn't want Derek breathing. But some part of her, some stupid, law-abiding, terrified part of her, said, "Wait. Wait, don't hurt him. The police will not come," the man with the umbrella said. Gently, like he was telling a child there was no Santa. "They have not come yet, and they will not come now. Don't hurt him." He looked at her for a long second. She couldn't read his face. "As you wish." He said something else in the other language. The big man dropped Derek. Derek hit the pavement and curled up and made a whimpering sound. The big man kicked him once, hard, in the ribs. Aria heard something crack, and then stepped away. The man with the umbrella was still crouched in front of her. "My name is Lucien Moretti," he said. "I'm going to take you and the boys somewhere safe. You do not have to trust me, but you do have to come." Aria's mouth was full of blood. Her vision was going soft at the edges. She tried to say something smart, something defiant, something like, "I don't go anywhere with strange men, not even the ones who stopped my ex from killing me in an alley." What came out was, "Why?" Lucien Moretti looked at her for a long, unreadable moment. Then he looked past her, at the broken window of the Civic, at the 6-year-old boy inside it, with his face pressed to the glass and his small hands flat against it. Something moved in his face, just once, just for a second. It was too fast to name, but it was there. "Because I can," he said. Then he stood up and said something to the big man, and the big man walked over to the Civic and gently, surprisingly gently, opened the driver's door and reached in and unlocked the back. Ethan didn't scream. Ethan didn't cry. Ethan looked at the big man and then looked at Aria on the ground, and when she lifted her hand 2 inches off the pavement and nodded, Ethan let himself be lifted out. Aria passed out in the back of a black SUV with her nephew's head on her lap, and a man she had never seen before sitting across from her, watching her with eyes the color of wet slate. The last thing she heard before the dark took her was his voice. Not to her, to someone on the phone. "Prepare the East Wing," he said, and a doctor, quietly. She woke up in a bed that wasn't hers. The sheets were white and smelled like lavender. The ceiling was 12 feet high and had a medallion of plaster molding around the light fixture. The light fixture was a chandelier, an actual chandelier, a small one but still. Aria sat up too fast and the room swam. Her face throbbed. She put her hand up and felt a row of butterfly bandages along her cheekbone and a bigger bandage at her temple. Her ribs ached. Her lip was split. She was wearing a t-shirt that wasn't hers, soft, gray, oversized, clearly a man's. "Ethan, he's fine." She jerked her head to the side. Lucien Moretti was sitting in a chair by the window. He had a book in his lap. He'd changed clothes. A dark sweater now, no jacket, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. His forearms were tan and corded and had a tattoo she couldn't read on the inside of one wrist. He didn't look up from the book. "He is asleep. In the next room. A woman named Sophia is with him. She raised 4 boys of her own. He has not been harmed. He has not been frightened since we arrived. He asked for you once, then he slept." "Where?" "My home." Where is your home? He closed the book. He set it on the table beside him. He finally looked at her. Does it matter? She stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Yes, it matters. It matters a lot. I don't know you. I don't know where I am. I don't know what you want. You are in a house outside the city. You are safe. The boy is safe. A physician has seen you both. You have a mild concussion, 2 bruised ribs, and 7 small lacerations on your face and arms. The boy is unhurt, physically. He paused. Emotionally is a different matter, but he is a strong child. He hasn't talked in a year. He spoke to Sophia this morning. He asked for pancakes. Aria put her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a choke, and Lucien Moretti watched her without expression. Who are you? She said, into her hands. What do you do? Men don't just pull other men off of women in alleys. Men don't have houses outside the city with doctors on call. Some men do. She lowered her hands. What does that mean? He considered her. The scar at his eyebrow caught the light. He was, she realized, with a jolt that had nothing to do with her concussion, an extraordinarily handsome man. Not in a warm way, in a cold, careful, deliberate way, the way a Rolex was handsome, or a gun. I am a businessman, he said. What kind of businessman? The kind whose name you have probably heard. I haven't heard your name. A small, brief movement at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, the ghost of one. That is because you are not the kind of person who would have heard it, and I prefer it that way. Aria's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the blanket. I can't stay here. You may leave whenever you wish. Where's my car? Being repaired. Your window was broken. I don't want it repaired. I want it now. I want my bags, I want my nephew, and I want to leave. Of course. He didn't move. Miss Bennett. How do you know my name? Your wallet was in your jacket. I looked. I apologize for the invasion. I needed to know whom I was treating. Miss Bennett is fine. Miss Bennett, you may leave. I will have a car brought around. I will have your nephew woken. I will have your belongings returned. However, he leaned forward just slightly. His eyes held hers. Before you do, I will tell you 3 things, and then you may decide. She didn't say anything. He took that as permission. 1. The man who attacked you will not trouble you tonight. He is in a hospital. He will live. He will be there for some time. However, he has friends. He has family. He has a brother, I believe, in a town called Hartwell, who has a record for assault. These people will come looking for him, and then they will come looking for you. Aria's stomach turned over. 2. The police in your precinct will not help you. I say this not as an opinion, but as a fact. I have reviewed your file. You have filed 4 reports in 14 months, 2 restraining orders. Neither was enforced. The officer who responded to your home last night is named Sergeant Brennan. He has logged your case as a domestic dispute. He will not pursue it. She stared at him. You reviewed my file? In 8 hours? How? 3. He held up a hand. Not a rude hand, a patient one. 3. Your nephew. He is the reason you have not run before. He is the reason you have not called your mother in Oregon. He is the reason you still live in the apartment above the laundromat, which you hate. He spoke today for the first time in over a year, in a house where he feels safe. Whether that means anything to you is not for me to say, but I would be remiss if I did not mention it. Aria's throat closed. She thought, he knows about my mother. He knows about the laundromat. He knows about Ethan. He knows everything. She thought, I should be terrified. She was terrified, but under the terror, underneath it, she felt something else. A kind of stillness. The stillness of standing in the eye of a hurricane. The stillness of a deer that has just realized the thing in the grass is not, in fact, a mountain lion. The stillness of the first warm meal after 3 days of hunger. She said, Why are you doing this? Lucien Moretti did not answer right away. He stood up. He walked to the window. He pulled back the heavy curtain with 2 fingers and looked out. and in the gray morning light she could see the shape of him more clearly. Broad shoulders, a long spine, a man who moved like he had trained his whole life to move without wasting a single motion. "I had a wife," he said, to the window. "A long time ago. And a son." He didn't turn around. "They are dead." Aria didn't say she was sorry. She had learned, when Maggie died, that "I'm sorry" was the emptiest phrase in the English language. She just waited. "I was not able to protect them," Lucien said. "I was too far away. I was busy with other things. Important things, I told myself. They were in a house that I had made safe. The safest house I could make. And it was not safe enough." He let the curtain fall. He turned back to her. "I do not make a habit of driving through alleys at dawn, Miss Bennett. I was returning from a long night. I saw a man drag a woman by her hair. I heard a child scream. I made a choice. If I had driven past, I would have known, for the rest of my life, that I had driven past. I have enough things to know, for the rest of my life. I did not need another." He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. "You may leave in the hour. I will have your car brought around, and I will have a man drive you and your nephew wherever you wish to go. Or," he paused, "you may stay. Not forever, not as a guest. As a guarded party. The East Wing is private. You will not see me unless you wish to. There is a kitchen, a garden, a room for the boy with a window that looks at the pond. A woman will come to teach him, if he wishes. A physician will continue to see you both until you are well." "For how long?" "Until the danger is past. And after that? After that you go. With money, if you need it. With a job, if you want one. With my word that no one will ever find you again unless you choose to be found." Aria stared at him. "Why?" she said again. Her voice cracked. "Why are you doing this for me? I'm nobody. I'm a waitress with a kid and a broken car and a psychopath ex. I'm nothing to you." Lucia Moretti turned the handle. He opened the door. He paused in the doorway, and the hallway light caught the side of his face, and she saw, for the first time, that he was tired. Bone-deep tired. The kind of tired that wasn't about sleep. "Miss Bennett," he said, "you are not nothing. No one is nothing. But I will admit, the boy reminds me of someone. That is my weakness, not yours. I have offered. You will decide." He stepped out. He closed the door behind him softly, the way a man closes a door in a hospital. Aria sat in the bed for a long time. She listened to the house. It was quiet. Not empty quiet, just controlled quiet. Somewhere, far away, she could hear a woman laughing, a pan being set down on a stove, a door opening and closing. The ordinary sounds of a place where people lived. She thought about her apartment, the splintered door, the plaster dust on the floor, the picture of Maggie still stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza. She thought about Mrs. Kowalski, paying for her own locksmith out of her Social Security check. She thought about Sergeant Brennan writing domestic dispute in a notepad. She thought about Derek's brother in Hartwell. She thought about Ethan, asleep in a bed in the next room, having asked out loud for pancakes. Pancakes! Aria put her face in her hands, and this time she did cry. Not hard, not long, just enough to let something out, just enough to make room for what came next. Then she got up. She found her jeans folded on a chair by the bed, clean, no blood, a pair of slippers on the floor. She put them on. She walked to the door. She opened it. The hallway was wood and pale gray walls and framed black and white photographs of places she didn't recognize. A harbor, a bridge, a village on a hill. A young woman in a gray dress was standing at the end of the hall. She looked up when Aria came out. "Miss Bennett, he is in the kitchen if you would like to see him." "Ethan?" "Yes." "Can you take me?" "Of course." Aria followed her. She passed 3 doors, a staircase, a room with a long table and 12 chairs. She smelled coffee and butter and something warm and sweet. The kitchen was at the end of a long hallway, and the kitchen had a window that looked out over a lawn and a row of tall hedges, and past the hedges, a gray morning sky. Ethan was at a table in the middle of the kitchen, a plate of pancakes in front of him. A short, broad woman, Sophia, Aria guessed, was pouring syrup over them. Ethan looked up when Aria came in. His eyes were red. He had dried tear tracks on his face, He had a streak of syrup on his chin. "Aunt Ari," he said, out loud, for the third time in 14 months. Aria went to him. She knelt beside his chair. She touched his face. She didn't say anything because she couldn't. He looked at her for a long second, and then he said in his small, hoarse voice, "I don't want to leave yet." And Aria, worn-out waitress, mother to a boy she hadn't given birth to, widow of a life she had never quite had, held her nephew and closed her eyes and felt, for the first time in 14 months, 3 weeks and 4 days, the absence of the thing that had been sitting behind her ribs. She didn't know it was gone forever, but it was gone for now. From the doorway behind her, she heard a footstep. Just one. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She knew who it was. She knew, in the way a person sometimes knows things they have no right to know, that she had already made her choice. Not with her mouth. Not with her head. With the small, tired, stubborn thing inside her chest that had, against all evidence, decided to trust a man whose name she could not have heard. She stayed kneeling. She held Ethan. She let him eat his pancakes. Behind her, the footstep moved away. Down the hall. Toward whatever room in this enormous, quiet house Lucien Moretti kept for himself. And outside, beyond the hedges, beyond the gray morning, somewhere in a city she could no longer see, the rain kept falling on an alley where, just a few hours earlier, a man she used to love had nearly killed her. She did not know yet what it would cost her to stay here. She did not know yet what it would cost him to let her. She only knew that her nephew was eating pancakes, and that he had asked for them out loud, and that for the first time in a long time, the next hour felt possible. She reached across the table and took a piece of pancake off his plate, and ate it, and Ethan smiled, a small, crooked, careful smile. And in that kitchen, in that quiet, in that borrowed morning, something began that none of them had the words for yet. The first 3 days in Lucien Moretti's house were a strange, sideways kind of peace. Aria spent most of the first one in bed, not because she was tired, but because every time she tried to stand up, the room tilted sideways and made her swallow something sour at the back of her throat. The doctor, a stout, gray-bearded man named Pellegrini, who spoke in short sentences and smelled faintly of tobacco, came twice that day. He shined a light in her eyes. He pressed 2 fingers against her ribs. He said she had gotten lucky, which was a thing doctors said to women who had not gotten lucky at all. And then he wrote something on a small pad and handed it to Sophia and said, in a voice that expected no argument, that Aria was not to climb any stairs for 2 days. "I don't know where the stairs are," Aria told him, which surprised her. It sounded almost like a joke. She hadn't tried to make a joke in a year. Pellegrini allowed the corner of his mouth to move. "Very good. Do not find them." Sophia brought her food on a tray. Broth the first night because Pellegrini said. Soft eggs and toast the next morning. A bowl of something Italian that Aria didn't have a name for, thick with greens and beans by the second afternoon. Sophia was maybe 50, built short and solid, with black hair pulled into a bun and a silver cross at her throat and a face that had seen enough to stop being surprised by most things. She spoke English with an accent Aria couldn't place, and she had a way of setting a tray down without a sound. "The boy is painting," she reported the first morning, "with Miss Elena. He likes the blue." "Who's Miss Elena?" "A teacher for children." "A teacher in the house?" "Yes. Just on staff. A teacher just works here." Sophia smiled very slightly, the way a person smiles at a child who is asked where the sun goes at night. "For now, yes. She is kind. Very patient." Aria didn't press. She ate her soup. She listened to the house. The East Wing, as Lucien had called it, was a long L-shaped corridor with 6 rooms off of it, and the walls were thick enough that she never heard voices, only the muffled impression of them. A door opening, a pan in a kitchen somewhere, the occasional footstep she was learning to recognize as a man who wasn't in a hurry. She tried to map it in her head. The bedroom she slept in. A sitting room across the hall with 2 couches and a cold fireplace. The kitchen where she'd found Ethan eating pancakes. A glass door at the end of the hall that opened onto a brick terrace and a sloping lawn that disappeared into a line of hedges she could not see past. She walked out onto the terrace on the second afternoon, in the same gray t-shirt she'd woken up in. No one had brought her clothes, and she hadn't thought to ask. And she stood there in her borrowed slippers in the cold air, and she tried to understand what she was looking at. The lawn was the size of a football field, maybe bigger. The hedges at the far end were taller than she was, taller than a man, taller than a truck. To the left, a stone wall curved around what looked like a garden in its winter sleep. Bare branches, a fountain that wasn't running, a stone bench gone green with moss. To the right, gravel paths wound away toward a row of cypress trees, and past those, the lines of what she guessed was another building. A guest house, maybe. A garage. A stable. She had no frame of reference for a place like this. The only big houses she had ever been inside were the Victorian funeral home where Maggie had been laid out, and the county courthouse where the judge had handed her Ethan's paperwork. Miss Bennett. She jumped. She hadn't heard him come out. He was standing at the edge of the terrace with his hands in the pockets of a long black coat. No umbrella this time. The sky was clear. He had a faint stubble along his jaw that he hadn't had in the alley, and there was a small bandage at the side of his thumb that she noticed and did not ask about. Mr. Moretti. Lucien is fine. Is it? He tilted his head. Does it trouble you? I don't know your last name, your first name, your middle name, or what you do for a living. I don't know what to call you. You know my last name. You do not know what I do for a living. That is true. Is this where you tell me? He considered her for a moment. His eyes were very steady. She had noticed that about him already. He didn't blink as often as most people. It was unnerving, and she suspected it was meant to be. You are shivering, he said. Yes. Come inside. Answer my question. Inside. You have a concussion. You should not be cold. I'm not a child. No, you're a stubborn woman in a wet January on a stone terrace in a t-shirt. I'm asking you to come inside. She considered very briefly refusing, but her feet were starting to feel numb in the slippers, and her ribs were aching in a way that seemed to confirm the doctor's opinion that she was not well enough to be making a point. And she hated him a little, this man in his long coat with his beautiful shoes, this man who said stubborn like he had been watching her for years. So she walked past him without looking at him, and she went back inside, and she let him close the door behind them both. He followed her into the sitting room. He sat on one of the couches, one ankle crossed over the opposite knee. She took the chair. She pulled a blanket that had been folded on the arm of the chair across her lap. I import olive oil, he said. She stared at him. Among other things. Other things. Wine, textiles, some medicines, electronic goods. And that's legal? The oil and the wine are legal. The textiles are largely legal. The medicines are sometimes legal. The electronic goods depend on the country of origin and the country of destination. And what else? What do you mean? What else do you do? You didn't pull a man off of me in an alley at 5 a.m. because you import olive oil. There was a long silence. He looked at her. She looked back. I resolve disputes, he said. Whose? Other men's. Other men who import olive oil. A very small, very brief smile. Other men who do many things. Are you a gangster, Lucien? He didn't answer right away. He was looking at her the way a chess player looks at a board he has been winning for 20 moves and just noticed something. When he did speak, it was slow, careful, and without heat. That is a word from movies. It is a short word for something that is not short. I do not use it. But if you're asking me whether the men who work in my house carry guns, the answer is yes. If you are asking whether I have had people killed, the answer is yes. If you are asking whether I am a dangerous man, the answer is yes. If you are asking whether I will ever be dangerous to you or to the boy, the answer is no. She felt the blood leave her face. She felt it come back. She had known. Of course she had known. A man did not keep a doctor on his estate. A man did not have a house with 6 bedrooms in an east wing that no one else apparently used. A man did not know, 8 hours after meeting her, about a precinct file and a cop named Brennan. She had known. But knowing and hearing were different things, and she sat in the armchair with the blanket across her knees, and she tried to think of what she wanted to say. My nephew is in there, she said finally. Her voice didn't shake, but it was close. Painting, with a teacher you employ, in the house of a man who, by his own admission, has had people killed. Yes. What am I doing here? That is your question to answer, not mine. Don't do that. Do what? Don't Philosophy me. Don't turn it around on me like it's a riddle I have to solve. I didn't bring me here. You brought me here. So tell me, what am I doing here? He was quiet for a long time. He uncrossed his leg. He set both feet flat on the floor. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at the rug between them. You are here because a man was going to kill you, and I did not want him to. He raised his eyes. That is not a riddle. That is the truth. And you help people out of the kindness of your heart. No, I do not think I have a kind heart. I think I have a heart that remembers things. That is not the same. Aria sat with that for a moment. What does it remember? He didn't look away. A son of my own, around the boy's age, gone now. I mentioned this. I will not mention it again. She waited. He stood up. He walked to the window. Outside, the lawn had gone from gray to silver as the clouds moved. She watched his back and understood, with a sort of low and unwilling sympathy, that he was a man who could not hold eye contact with certain kinds of truth. Mr. Moretti. Lucien. Lucien, I want to see Ethan. Of course. He is down the hall. And I want to know when I can leave. He turned. He looked at her over his shoulder. When you wish. Good. I am not keeping you. Good. I thought that was understood. It wasn't, she said. But it is now. She stood up, more carefully than she meant to, and he watched her walk to the door without trying to help, which she appreciated even though she wasn't sure she should appreciate it. She put her hand on the frame. She stopped. Lucien. Yes. Thank you. For what, Miss Bennett? For not lying to me. He inclined his head, an inch, no more. You are welcome. She walked down the hall. Ethan was in a room at the far end of the east wing, a room she hadn't yet been inside. And when she opened the door, she found him sitting at a small table with a piece of butcher paper taped down across the top. He had paint on his hands up to his elbows. Blue, mostly, a little green, a small bright flare of yellow on his nose. He looked up and saw her, and his whole face did something she hadn't seen it do in 14 months. It opened. Aunt Ari, he said, I made a lake. A lake? With a boat. Elena said I can keep it. The woman on the other side of the table was in her late 20s, honey-colored hair, a white shirt rolled up to the elbows. She stood and smiled at Aria, warmly but not too warmly, the way a competent person smiles when the boss's cousin walks into a room she has been running alone. Miss Bennett, I'm Elena Vargas. I'm very glad to meet you. You're his teacher. I teach children, yes, for the household. There are more children. Elena's smile flickered just a little. No, not at the moment. Aria looked at her, at Ethan, at the butcher paper, at the bright smeared lake and the lopsided boat and the yellow sun that her nephew had not been able to draw a month ago because he had been too locked inside his own small body to pick up a brush. She walked over. She knelt beside the table. She looked at the painting for a long time. It's beautiful, Ethan. The boat's for you, he said, so you don't get tired. Her throat went shut. She nodded because she couldn't talk, and she kissed the top of his head, and he leaned into her like he had been saving the leaning up for weeks. Elena quietly stepped away from the table and busied herself at a sink on the far side of the room. She was good at her job, Aria thought, in the part of her brain that was still working. She was a person who knew when to disappear. That night, Aria stayed in the room on the twin bed Sophia had made up for her, and Ethan slept in the big bed, and she lay awake for hours listening to her nephew breathe in the dark. He didn't wake up screaming. He didn't kick the covers off. He breathed, long and slow and easy, the way a child was supposed to breathe, and she thought, I can't give this back to him and then take it away. She thought, one more day. She had been thinking one more day for 3 days when the phone call came. It was Sophia who brought her the phone, a house landline, an old cream-colored thing with a coiled cord. Aria hadn't given anyone the number of the house because she didn't know the number of the house, which made it strange that a call had come through for her, and she said so, and Sophia, who was a woman of very few extra words, said only, It is your mother. How did she... Mr. Moretti, he calls her yesterday. He says to her, you are safe. He thinks you would not have called. He called my mother. She was worried. The police, they call her. About the apartment. Aria took the phone. Mom. Oh my God, Aria, oh my God. Her mother cried. Aria's mother was a 63-year-old retired nurse in Oregon who had buried a daughter and could not, currently, afford to fly out to buy her surviving one a cup of coffee, and she cried for a full minute and a half into the phone before she could say anything else. And Aria sat on the edge of the bed with her eyes closed and listened to her mother cry and felt herself age several years in the process. A man called me, her mother said when she was able. A man. He said his name was Lucian. He said you were hurt, but you were safe. He said Ethan was with you. He said I should not tell anyone I had heard from you. He said he would have a lawyer call me about getting you both out of the state if you wanted. I didn't ask him to do that. I know. He said that. He said you hadn't told him to call me. He said he was calling because I would be worried and that I deserved to not be worried. He was very polite, Aria. He has an accent. Who is this man? Aria pressed the heel of her hand into her eye. He's a stranger who found me. Mom, it's complicated. The police called me yesterday. I know. They said your apartment was destroyed. They said your front door was kicked in. They said there was blood on the stairs. Mom, is it Derek? Mom, Aria, is it Derek? Aria closed her eyes. Yes. The sound her mother made was the sound of a woman who had been waiting 14 months for the other shoe to drop and who had just heard it hit the floor. Where is he, Aria? In a hospital. Good. Well, Mom, good, Aria. I'm sorry, but good. Do you hear me? I'm not sorry. I am not sorry. I hear you. This man, the one who called me, is he the one who put Derek in the hospital? Not personally. But he arranged it, in a manner of speaking. Aria, Mom, I need you to listen to me. Please, I need you to listen. Her mother went quiet. Aria could hear her breathing. I don't know what I've gotten myself into. I don't. I want to tell you I have a plan, and I don't. I have a 6-year-old who spoke his first sentence in a year yesterday. I have a concussion. I have a car with a broken window and $300. And I have a man I have known for 4 days who has not asked me for a single thing, who has put me up in a house I could not afford to stay in for a night, and who looked me in the face and told me what he was, and did not lie. I don't know what the right thing is, Mom. I don't know it. I'm not going to pretend I know it. I'm figuring this out an hour at a time. Come home. Mom? Come home, Aria. Come to Oregon. You and Ethan. I have the spare room. I have it all ready. I've had it ready for a year. Aria's throat burned. I can't put you in danger. I'm your mother. You're 63 years old, and you've had 2 heart stents put in the last 2 years. Derek has a brother. He has friends. The man who's letting me stay here told me they'd come looking for me. Mom, I can't have them go to your house. I can't. If anything happened to you, I know. If anything happens to you, Aria, I know, Mom, I know. Her mother was crying again. Aria was not. She had moved past it, into that cold, clear place where she could hear her own voice from a distance. And the voice was saying reasonable things about Oregon and heart stents and a brother in Hartwell. And the woman the voice belonged to was gripping the phone so hard her fingers had gone white. Stay there, her mother said, finally. Just for now. Just stay there, with the polite man, and call me every day. Every day, Aria. I swear to God, if you don't call me every day, I'll drive out there myself. I don't care how many stents I have. Every day? Promise me. I promise. She hung up. She sat on the bed with the phone in her lap for a long time. When she finally looked up, Ethan was standing in the doorway in a pair of pajamas she'd never seen before, soft navy ones with a pattern of small sailboats. And he was holding his rabbit under one arm. And he was watching her. Are you sad? He said. A little bit, baby. Just a little bit. Because of Grandma? No, Grandma's okay. I was just talking to her. He came into the room. He climbed up onto the bed beside her. He leaned his head against her shoulder. She put her arm around him, and he smelled like somebody else's shampoo. Something expensive, something with rosemary in it. And she thought, He has been bathed in another man's house with another man's shampoo, and he smells like a child who is being looked after. Aunt Ari, he said. Yeah. Mr. Moretti said I could feed the ducks tomorrow. The ducks? On the pond. There's a pond. He said I could. Did he? He said only if you said yes. Aria looked down at the top of her nephew's head. Okay, she said. You can feed the ducks. Can you come? Yes. I'll come. The pond was past the cypress trees, at the bottom of a long slope of winter grass. Aria had not seen it before. She saw it the next morning, walking down the gravel path in a wool coat Sophia had put in her closet overnight, without explanation, holding Ethan's gloved hand on one side and watching Lucien Moretti walk on the other side of her nephew on the other. Lucien was carrying a brown paper bag. Stale bread, he had said at the door. Not a lot. Too much is bad for them. You feed ducks, Aria had said. I do not personally feed ducks. I am, however, told that stale bread is what one uses. Who told you? Sophia. Sophia, who is a professional duck advisor. Sophia is a professional most things. The cold was bright and sharp. Aria could see her breath. Ethan was practically running, tugging on both their hands, and Aria, for the first time since she had arrived at the house, let herself look at Lucien Moretti without looking away. He had on a charcoal coat and a scarf the color of dried blood, and he was walking with his free hand in his pocket, and he was matching his stride to Ethan's in a way that looked completely unconscious. His face was turned a little toward the boy, not watching him exactly, just oriented to him. The way a person stands close to something fragile they do not want to drop. The ducks were on the far side of the pond, clustered in a patch of reeds. When Ethan let out a small yell and broke into a run, they paddled in formation toward the shore with the slow dignity of animals who had been bribed by humans many times before. There are 8, Lucien said. You counted them. I have walked past them many times. You have a pond with ducks you do not feed. I have a pond with ducks other people feed. He handed Ethan the bag. Small pieces. Throw them where you can see them. Do not try to touch any of the ducks. They are rude. They're rude? Ethan looked up at him with enormous eyes. Very rude. They will bite. They will chase. They will hiss. You will think they are sweet, and then you will try to pet one, and you will learn something about yourself and about ducks. Ethan laughed. It was a small, high, delighted laugh. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Aria had to turn her face away because she hadn't heard her nephew laugh since Maggie had died, and she hadn't realized until just that moment how badly she had needed to. Lucien stood beside her. He watched Ethan tear a piece of bread and hurl it too hard, so it landed on top of a duck's head. He'll learn, Lucien said. Yes. He is a good child. Yes, he's a good child. My son was 9. She turned to look at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching Ethan. I do not say it to compare or to ask anything of you. I only say it because it is easier to tell you while the boy is throwing bread at a duck. My son was 9. His name was Matteo. He liked a particular kind of orange soda that is difficult to find in this country. He was afraid of spiders. He could not whistle, though he tried very hard. He died with his mother in a car. A man had paid another man to do it. The man who paid is no longer alive. The man who did it is also no longer alive. That is as much of the story as there is. Aria stood very still. Lucien, I do not want your pity or your comfort. It is not why I told you. I tell you so that you know why I stopped in an alley. I tell you so that you understand I am not doing this out of a wish to have a family around me again. I am doing it because a child screamed, and a woman was bleeding, and I have already been the man who was too late once in my life. I did not wish to be that man twice. I didn't think you were, she said softly. I mean, I wondered for about an hour after the first day, but I stopped wondering. Why? Because you haven't touched me. His mouth moved faintly. That is a very low bar, Miss Bennett. I know, but it's the bar I've lived at. He looked at her then, full in the face for the first time that day. His eyes were that same wet slate, and they were tired, and they were not cold. And Aria realized with a low pulse of alarm that she was in more danger from this man than she had known. Not the danger she'd been worried about, not a knife in the dark, but a slower and quieter danger that had to do with a good coat and a brown paper bag, and the word Mateo. "Look, Aunt Ari," Ethan yelled. "He ate it." "I see, baby. He ate it right out of the water." "That's what they do, honey." She was grateful for the interruption. She thought Lucien was grateful too. They stood there for another 20 minutes while Ethan distributed his bread with the gravity of a priest giving communion. Lucien gave small instructions. "That one is smaller. Try to give it to her first. No, do not step on the mud. It is frozen on top and wet underneath." Aria listened and understood, dimly, that she was watching a man who had decided to do a thing he had not done in a long time. She understood also that she was going to remember this half hour for the rest of her life. She didn't know yet in what key, but she knew it would stay. On the walk back up the slope, Ethan got tired, and Lucien, without making any show of it, picked him up and carried him against one shoulder. Ethan's head dropped onto the collar of the charcoal coat within 30 seconds. He fell asleep before they reached the terrace. At the door of the east wing, Lucien shifted the sleeping boy in his arms. "I will carry him to his bed. I can take him. You have bruised ribs. I can take him." He didn't argue. He simply bent and transferred Ethan to her, very carefully, and she took the weight, and her ribs did scream, and she didn't let her face show it because she wasn't going to lose that particular round. Lucien watched her walk into the house. She felt him watching. She didn't turn around. That night, a man was shot outside a bar in Hartwell. Aria did not learn this until the next morning, when she was eating toast in the kitchen and Sophia brought her a small stack of papers, newspapers she realized, printed out, 3 articles from 3 different local sources, and set them beside her plate without comment. The man was Derek Wells's brother, Roy, 34. A history of arrests for assault and aggravated battery. 2 DUIs, a brief stint in a county jail for violating a protection order filed by his ex-girlfriend, the protection order having involved, among other things, the breaking of said ex-girlfriend's jaw. The articles said he had been shot in the parking lot of a bar called the Rusted Horseshoe at 11:42 p.m. by a person or persons unknown, in what local police were describing as a possible gang-related incident. He was alive. He was in critical condition. He was not expected to speak to investigators for some time. Aria read the articles twice. Then she got up. She left her plate on the table. She walked out of the kitchen, down the east wing, across the front hall, which she had never been in before, and which was about the size of her old apartment, and down a long corridor Sophia had once, in passing, called the library side. She knocked on the first door she came to. A man she had not seen before opened it. She didn't know his name, and she didn't care. "I need to see Lucien." "Mr. Moretti is in a meeting, ma'am." "I need to see Lucien now." Something in her face must have been enough. The man, broad-shouldered, gray-suited, a faint scar across the bridge of his nose, studied her for a beat, then said something low into a small radio at his cuff, and a moment later he stepped aside. She walked past him. She walked the length of the corridor. A second man opened a second door. A room opened up before her. A long room. An enormous oak table. A fireplace, with a fire actually going, 4 men seated around the table, and 1 man standing at the head of it with his hand on the back of a chair. Lucien, in a black sweater, sleeves pushed up, the tattoo on his inner wrist clearer now in the firelight. She still couldn't read it. A numeral? A letter? A symbol from a language she didn't speak. The 4 men at the table turned to look at her. "Out," Lucien said to them. They got up. One of them said something in Italian under his breath. Another looked her up and down in a way she did not appreciate. They filed past her. The door closed behind them. "Sit down, Miss Bennett." "No." "Sit down." "You shot him." He did not deny it. He did not confirm it. He pulled a chair out from the table with 2 fingers. "Sit down, please." She sat. He sat across from her. He folded his hands on the table. She noticed for the first time that there were dark blue shadows under his eyes that had not been there yesterday. He had not slept. "I did not shoot him," he said. "But someone you sent did." "Yes." "Why?" "Because he was driving into this city at 6 o'clock last night with another man and a shotgun and a bag containing a length of chain and a roll of duct tape. I did not wait to see where they were going." Aria's stomach dropped. "How did you— I have told you. I have eyes. I had a man watching the brother's house the morning after the alley. That was the moment to put eyes on him. Before he could collect himself, before the news reached him in whatever form it was going to reach him. The moment a man like Roy Wells hears that a man like his brother has been put in a hospital, you know where he will go. You watch him. That is what I did. You had a man watching him for 4 days. Yes. And last night he got in a truck with another man, with a shotgun, and they drove toward a city in which you and your nephew are currently the only two people I am concerned with. I made a decision, Miss Bennett. I did not consult you. I apologize for that. I would do it again. She stared at him. He's in critical condition. Yes. Is he going to live? I do not know. Probably not. I hope he does. It would be tidier. She almost laughed. Almost. It wasn't a laugh that had anything to do with humor. It was a sound her body was making because it had nowhere else to put what she was feeling. Tidier! If he dies, the police investigate for a week and close the file. If he lives, he speaks. If he speaks, he does so from a hospital bed, while I have 4 attorneys who have never lost a case in this city working the question of what exactly he can prove. Either way, he does not come here. That is the only question that matters to me. It's not the only question that matters to me. I know. He has people. That article said he had friends. They're being spoken to. Spoken to. Yes, by men with shotguns, by men with words, Miss Bennett. For the moment, men with shotguns are the option of last resort. They are also expensive, and I do not like to use them. I prefer words. Aria put her hands flat on the table. She stared at them. Her knuckles were still scabbed from the alley. I can't be here. I can't be somewhere where someone gets shot because of me. I can't be somewhere where 4 men in a room decide the future of another man and whether he speaks or not. I can't be... I'm a waitress. I'm a waitress from a laundromat building. You are alive. That's not... You are alive. Your nephew is alive. He is sleeping upstairs in a warm bed, and he laughed yesterday at a duck. His Uncle Roy is in critical condition in a hospital, and he did not get there because of you. He got there because of himself, and because of a series of decisions he and his brother and other men made long before you ever came into an alley that I happened to drive past. You are not the reason any of this has happened. You are the reason I have paid attention to it. She was breathing hard. She couldn't make herself stop. You can't keep doing this. Doing what? Making the world work for me. Making cops not come and brothers get shot. And you can't keep doing this. I can't owe someone this much. He didn't answer right away. He looked at her in that quiet, steady way he had. You do not owe me anything, he said finally. Yes, I do. No. Lucienne. Miss Bennett. His voice didn't rise. If anything, it went lower, softer. If I had a daughter, if my wife had lived, if my son were upstairs, and a stranger came into my house and said, I pulled your daughter out of an alley and I have kept her and her child alive for 4 days. Do you know what I would say to that stranger? No. I would say, tell me what you need. Name it. I will give it to you, and I will not accept any repayment. That is what I would say, because that is what a father would say. He held her eyes. I have no daughter. You have no father. I do not say these things because I am trying to be one or to replace anything. I say them because if I had been in the alley first, I would have been your father. And I was not. But I was in the alley second. And so I am what I am. Not a father, not a husband, not a brother. Something else. Something without a name. But you do not owe me anything for it. Aria did not cry. She had promised herself somewhere in the last 24 hours that she was done crying in front of this man. She pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth, and she breathed through her teeth, and she held on. After a long time, she said, What is something without a name? I don't know. Useful. His mouth moved, almost a smile. Perhaps. Lucien. Yes. I need to call my mother. Of course. And I need to not see you at dinner tonight. I need a night. I need a night to sit with this. Can you give me a night? Yes. Okay. She stood up. She was halfway to the door when he spoke again. "Miss Bennett." "Yes. I did not like that you walked into this room without waiting. There are men in this house who do not know you. Some of them are jumpy. I would prefer you did not do it again, not because you have no right, because I would prefer that you remained unharmed. May I have your word?" She turned at the door. She looked at him across the oak table. The fire crackled behind him. He looked for a moment like a man in an old painting she had once seen on a field trip to a museum in 6th grade. A king who had not wanted the crown. "Yes," she said, "you have my word." She walked out. Was. That night she did not eat dinner with him. Sophia brought food to the East Wing. Aria sat at the small kitchen table with Ethan and let him tell her, at great length, the names he had given the ducks. Mr. Bread, Miss Bread, Baby Bread, Bad Duck, the father. And she laughed in all the right places, and she cut his meat into small pieces, and she watched his small face, and she let herself understand for the first time what she was going to do. She was not going to leave yet. She was going to let her nephew name ducks. She was going to let her ribs heal. She was going to let a man whose last name she had only just learned pay for a doctor who knew how to treat a concussion, and a teacher who knew how to get a 6-year-old to paint a lake with a boat in it for a tired ant, and a housekeeper who brought warm bread without being asked. She was going to stay. Not forever. Not as a guest. As something without a name. And she was going to be very, very careful about the slate-colored eyes. Later, after Ethan was asleep, she walked out onto the terrace one more time. The wind had come up, and the lawn was silver again under a bright half-moon, and down at the bottom of the slope she could just make out the pond, flat and black and quiet. The ducks were in their reeds. The fountain in the garden was still dry. The hedges were still taller than a man. And inside somewhere, several rooms away, in a part of the house she had only been in once, a man she had just begun to know was, she suspected, also not eating dinner. She stood with her hands in the pockets of a coat that wasn't hers, under a sky that she had never in her life seen from a lawn she could never in her life have afforded, and she thought, I am not going to be the same person who walked into an alley 4 days ago. I do not know who I am going to be instead, but I am not going to be her. From somewhere behind her, across the lawn, a single light went on in an upstairs window on the other side of the house. It stayed on for a long time. It did not go off before she went inside. She closed the terrace door behind her. She turned the lock. She stood there a moment, her forehead against the cold glass, and then she went down the hall to check on her nephew one more time before she slept. Ethan checked on was breathing the slow, heavy breath of a child who had run too far and eaten too much bread. And Aria stood in the doorway of his room watching the rise and fall of the blanket for longer than she needed to, the way people stand over sleeping children when they have nothing else left in them to do. The next morning she woke before the sun did. She lay on her back in the bed and listened to the house. Somewhere far away, a door opened and closed. Somewhere closer, a floorboard ticked as the radiators warmed up. Outside her window, a bird, some kind of bird, she had no idea what kind of bird. She had grown up in cities where the only birds were pigeons and the pigeons didn't sing, was doing something that sounded close enough to singing that she lay there listening to it for a long time. She thought about Roy Wells in a hospital bed in Hartwell. She thought about Derek in a different hospital bed somewhere else. She thought about the shotgun and the chain and the duct tape. She thought, I should be horrified. She was not horrified. That was the problem. Somewhere between reading the printed articles and watching Lucien Moretti sit very still at an oak table and tell her that he would do it again, some valve had closed in her. She was not horrified. She was relieved. She felt, at the bottom of her chest, a relief so complete and so shameful that she did not know what to do with it. Someone had wanted to hurt her, and someone else had made sure he could not. That was the whole thing. That was the arithmetic. The arithmetic disgusted her. She lay in bed and let the disgust wash over her, and then she got up anyway, because Ethan was going to wake up hungry, and Shame did not cook breakfast. She found Lucianus in the kitchen. She had not expected that. She had made her way down the east wing in her socks and the big t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants Sophia had left for her hair up in a lazy knot, and she had walked into the kitchen expecting Sophia or no one at all. And instead, there he was at the small table by the window with a cup of coffee in both hands and a newspaper, a real one folded in half, on the chair beside him. He was in a white dress shirt, open at the collar, no tie, the same sleeves pushed to the elbows. His hair was damp. He had just come from the shower. He looked up. Good morning, Miss Bennett. Morning. She stood in the doorway for a second, caught. She did not want to walk past him in sweatpants at 6 in the morning. She also did not want to retreat, which would be worse. I thought you ate in the main dining room. I do. When I eat breakfast, I am having coffee. Coffee, I prefer here. The dining room is formal at this hour. There's a formal hour for coffee. I have found that there is, yes. She went to the counter. The percolator was going on the stove. She poured herself a cup in a mug she found in the cupboard, and she stood with her back to him for a moment longer than she needed to, and then she turned around and leaned against the counter and looked at him. I said I needed a night. You did. It's morning. It is. You're in my kitchen. I am in my own kitchen, Miss Bennett. I have been coming to this kitchen for coffee before sunrise for a number of years. You are in my kitchen. I have not yet decided whether that is a violation of your request. She almost smiled. She didn't quite. She blew on her coffee. Fine. You may stay. I will go, if you prefer. Don't. It's fine. I'm not mad at you. I don't know what I am, but it's not mad. All right. She sat down across from him. She didn't know why. There was a second chair. She took it. She put her coffee on the table between them. He didn't move the paper. He didn't move anything. He took another sip of coffee and watched the kitchen window slowly turn from black to gray to pale pink. Why do you get up this early? She said. I do not sleep well. Since when? 12 years. Oh. Yes. She watched him. There were still those dark smudges under his eyes, slightly lighter than they had been yesterday, not by much. Do you sleep at all? 3 or 4 hours. On a good night, 5, sometimes, if I'm tired in a certain way. What's the certain way? He thought about that for a second. Content, he said. A tired body with a mind that is not chewing on anything. It is a rare alignment. Were you tired like that last night? No. 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 They drank their coffee. After a while, Sophia came in with a basket of rolls and gave them both a long look. A look Aria couldn't quite read. A look that was not disapproving, not exactly, but that noticed things, and set the basket between them and left again. Aria broke one of the rolls open. It was still warm. She ate half of it before she said anything else. Did you sleep at all last night? Some. Yes. Because a man might die in a hospital in Hartwell, or because of something else. He set down his coffee. He looked at her, the slate eyes still very steady. Because of something else. All right, I won't ask. It was you. What? The other thing. The thing that kept me awake. You have asked. I will answer. It was you. She stared at him. He did not elaborate. He picked up his coffee. He took another sip. He set it down again. He looked out the window. I'm sorry. What? I thought about what you said to me yesterday. That I cannot keep doing this. That you cannot owe me this much. It is a reasonable thing to think. I thought about it for a long time. I came to the conclusion that you were right, but not in the way you think. You should not keep owing me. That is correct. Where we disagree is on the question of who is doing the owing. I have not lent you anything, Miss Bennett. I have not given you anything I would wish back. I have not kept a ledger. I do not plan to. This is what kept me awake last night. I was trying to think how to say it to you so you would believe it. I have not thought of a way, so instead I will say it plainly. He turned back from the window. I do not want your debt. I do not want your gratitude, beyond what any person might feel for another person. I want you to stop counting. That is all. She opened her mouth. She closed it. That's a lot of words for a man who doesn't sleep, she managed. I do not sleep. I read. That is a lot for before sunrise. I apologize. Don't apologize. You wanted a night. I gave you a night. Now it is morning. I was not going to pretend I had not thought about it. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. Okay. I'll try. Try what? To stop counting. He nodded once and picked up his paper. They sat like that for another 20 minutes. She ate another roll. He read his paper. Ethan came padding down the hallway, at some point in a pair of pajamas with the small sailboats, dragging his rabbit by one ear. And when he saw Lucien at the table, he did not stop, and he did not hesitate. He walked over and leaned against the arm of Lucien's chair and looked at the paper. "What are you reading?" Ethan said. "The news." "What's the news say?" "Mostly boring things. Men in suits. Prices of things. Any ducks?" "No, I'm sorry. I can ask about ducks tomorrow." "Please do." Ethan climbed up into the empty third chair. Lucien, without looking at him, tore off a corner of his own roll and put it on a plate and slid the plate across the table. Ethan took it. Aria, who had been watching this sequence like a woman watching a bomb be defused, got up and went to the cupboard and got him a glass of orange juice without saying anything at all. Something shifted in the house after that morning. Not fast. Nothing in Lucien Moretti's house moved fast. But after that morning, Aria stopped having meals brought to her in the East Wing. She took them in the kitchen, with Sophia moving in and out, and then, by the end of the first week, at the long table in the dining room with Ethan on her right and Lucien at the head, and sometimes 2 or 3 men she did not know at the far end, quiet men, bent over plates, nodding at her but not speaking. And the dining room was the size of a chapel, and the food was always too much. And at first she ate like a person who was not sure the meal was not going to end suddenly. And by the end of the second week, she ate like a woman. The bruises faded. The butterfly bandages came off. The cut on her temple closed into a thin pink line that Pellegrini, when he saw it on his final visit, pronounced no great trouble and nothing a little sun will not repair. And then he took his bag and shook her hand with a grip that was surprisingly warm and told her that she was an intelligent woman with a thick skull, and she was not sure if the second part was a compliment until he was out the door. Ethan started sleeping in his own bed. He stopped carrying the rabbit everywhere by the 10th day. He carried it to breakfast and to bed and on the walks to the pond, and he let it stay on a shelf the rest of the time. And Aria caught herself, one afternoon, sitting on the edge of the bed in the room that was increasingly his and not hers, looking at the shelf with the rabbit on it and thinking, "He is healing," and then thinking, almost in the same breath, "We have to leave." The thing about "we have to leave" was that she could not find a place to put it. She called her mother every day. They were careful conversations. Her mother did not ask whether Aria was sleeping with the polite man because Aria's mother was 63 and had not been born yesterday, and did not need to ask questions she knew the answer to. She asked instead how Ethan was, and whether he was still talking, and whether he was eating, and whether he was making friends. Aria said yes to all of it, truthfully. She did not tell her mother about the pond, or the ducks, or the charcoal coat, or about the way her nephew, the night before, had fallen asleep in the library on a leather couch with his head on Lucien's knee, while Lucien read aloud from a book about a boy and a horse and a very long winter. She did not tell her mother about any of that because if she said it out loud to her mother, she would have to say it out loud to herself. She did, however, talk to Elena. Elena Vargas, the teacher, turned out to be a person Aria could talk to. They started in small pieces. A comment about the weather, a compliment on a painting Ethan had made, a question about reading level. But Elena was 29 years old and had a master's degree in early childhood development from a university Aria had heard of, and she had been working for Lucien Moretti for 3 years. And after the first week, Aria made herself a cup of tea in the kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon and walked it down the hall and knocked on the door of the classroom where Elena was cleaning paint off a table. "Can I sit for a minute?" "Of course." She sat on one of the child-sized chairs, which put her knees somewhere up near her chin, and Elena sat on another one across from her, and Elena didn't say anything. She just waited. That was the thing about people in this house, Aria had noticed. They waited. Nobody chased. "Who are you?" Aria said finally. "Who are any of you? Sophia, Pellegrini, you? Are all of you? I mean, I'm sorry. Are you a teacher, or are you a teacher who is also something else?" Elena smiled. It was a tired smile, not an unhappy one. "I am a teacher, Miss Bennett." Aria. "I'm a teacher who has worked for Mr. Moretti for 3 years. Before that, I worked at a private school in the city. Before that, I worked at a public school in the city. Before that, I was a graduate student with very little money who had an uncle in a sort of trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that ends with a funeral. A small one, closed casket." Elena paused. She looked at her hands. My uncle had made some very unwise decisions. He had owed money to the wrong people, and he was about to do something worse to try to pay it back. Mr. Moretti had known my father when they were both younger men. My father went one way. Mr. Moretti went another. But they remained in contact. When my uncle died, my father called Mr. Moretti, and Mr. Moretti came to the house. And he sat with my father at the kitchen table for 4 hours, and they drank a bottle of something. And when he left, he said to me in the hallway, "When you finish your studies, come to me. I will find a use for you." That is all he said. Aria stared at her. "And you came." 3 years later, yes. I had paid off my student loans by then, working 2 jobs. I was very tired. He offered me a salary that did not seem real. He asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to teach. He said, "Then teach." Teach who? At the time, the gardener's son. A very sweet boy. He is in college now. Who else have you taught? Over the years? Yes. A housekeeper's daughter, the groundskeeper's twins, a boy whose mother was in a very bad situation for 2 months, 3 years ago. A girl who stayed here for 1 summer and then went to live with her grandmother in another country. There are others, not at the same time usually. Aria looked at her. So Ethan isn't the first. No. He's just the most recent. He is the only child in the house right now, but he is not the first child who ended up in this house because someone was in trouble. No. Aria set her tea down on the little child-sized table. Her hands were shaking. She did not know why her hands were shaking. So that's what he does. He collects people. He does not collect them, Elena said gently. I chose my words poorly if I gave you that impression. No one is here who does not wish to be here. The boy and his mother, 3 years ago, they went on to a relative. The girl who stayed for a summer. She had her own grandmother. The gardener's son. He went away to school. Mr. Moretti does not keep people. He puts them where the weather is better for a little while until the storm passes. That is all. For a little while. Yes, not forever. Elena looked at her. Aria could not read the look. No one has stayed forever, Elena said carefully. No one has yet tried. Marasem. There was a night about 3 weeks in when Aria could not sleep. It was nothing in particular. She had eaten too much at dinner, and her body had gone through that strange quiet settling it had started to do now that she was not being hit or chased or screamed at, and the settling had come with a weariness that somehow would not translate into sleep. She lay in the dark for a long time. She could hear Ethan breathing in the next room through the half-open door. She got up. She pulled on a cardigan that Sophia had put in the closet. Black, soft, too expensive for her. And she walked barefoot down the east wing to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of milk. She did not go back to the east wing. She drifted, instead. She had not explored the house. She had confined herself mostly to the east wing, the kitchen, the dining room, the library where Ethan had fallen asleep that night, the back terrace. She had never walked upstairs. She had never gone into the west wing. She had never been in any of the rooms that Lucien Moretti, as far as she could tell, actually lived in. She walked out of this kitchen with her milk. She turned left instead of right. She followed the main corridor to the front hall, and she stood at the bottom of the big staircase for a long moment, looking up. And then, because she had not been able to sleep, and because some reckless, curious, stubborn thing in her had gotten tired of being careful, she went up. The second floor was the long carpeted hall with tall doors on either side. Most of the doors were closed. One, at the far end, was ajar, and a warm yellow light was spilling out of it onto the runner. She should have gone back. She did not go back. She walked down the hall, quietly, in her bare feet. She stopped at the open door. She looked in. It was a study, a big one. 2 walls of bookshelves, floor to ceiling, crammed, a desk under a window that had to look out over the back lawn in daylight, but was black now. A lamp on the desk, a green-shaded banker's lamp throwing a circle of light onto an open book, and 2 photographs in silver frames. Lucien was not at the desk. He was standing in front of a low shelf on the far wall, his back to her, holding something in his hand. A bottle, she thought at first. And then he tilted it. and in the lamplight she saw that it was a small framed photograph, the kind a person kept on a mantelpiece, and he was looking at it the way a person looks at a photograph they have looked at every night for 12 years. She should have backed away. She did not back away. He didn't turn. He didn't flinch. He said quietly, "The floorboard by the door is loud, Miss Bennett. I heard you in the hall." "I didn't mean... I wasn't... It is all right. I was just getting milk. I didn't mean to come up here." "It is all right." He set the photograph back on the shelf. He turned. He was in a soft gray robe over a black t-shirt and pajama pants, and his feet were in leather slippers, and his hair was falling down out of where he usually combed it. And for a second she could not place him. This was not the man at the head of the oak table. It was not the man with the paper at the kitchen window. It was some third man she had not yet met. And then she realized she was looking at him as he was when no one was supposed to be looking at him. I'll go. You do not have to. Come in or go. Either is fine. I do not mind either." She came in. She did not know why she came in. She stood just inside the doorway with her glass of milk and felt, with a sharp and ridiculous pang, how out of her depth she was. A woman from a laundromat building, in a house she could not afford, in the private study of a man who kept the photograph of a dead child on a shelf with a green lamp shining on it. Is that Matteo?" "Yes." "Can I see?" He looked at her for a long second. Then he walked to the shelf and picked up the photograph and held it out to her. She took it. The boy in the photograph was 9. He had dark hair like his father. He had a dimple in his left cheek. He was wearing a blue soccer jersey 2 sizes too big for him, with grass stains on the knees, and he was grinning at whoever was holding the camera like he had just told a joke. There was a woman in the background of the picture, out of focus, her hand on his shoulder. Aria couldn't make out her face. "He looks like you." "Yes." "Does he?" "The jersey." He had scored a goal, his first. He had never scored one before. He believed he would never score one. He told me this many times. He was wrong. I was late to the game. I was supposed to be there at the beginning. I was there for the last 10 minutes. He did not know I was coming. He scored the goal and he turned around and he saw me on the sideline and he ran to me and he leaped into my arms in the jersey with the grass still on it. And his mother took the picture with her phone, just before I caught him. His feet are off the ground. She used to tease me that I caught him like a fish. Aria looked at the photograph, at the grin, at the stains on the knees, at the blur of the woman's arm reaching out to keep him from falling forward. What was her name? Isabella. Isabella. Yes. It's a beautiful photograph, Lucien. Yes, it is. She handed it back to him. He put it on the shelf. He did not turn from the shelf for a moment. Then he did. And he looked at her, and she saw with a small painful lurch in her chest that there was wet at his lashes that he had not yet let fall. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. You came for milk. I didn't come to make you cry. You have not made me cry. I do this sometimes. In the night, I take the photograph off the shelf and I look at it and I put it back. I have done it for many years. It is not a thing to be concerned about. I wasn't going to be concerned. Good. Lucien. Yes. Why do you still do it? Do what? Take the picture off the shelf, every night, after 12 years. He looked at her for a long moment. He didn't answer for so long that she thought he wasn't going to. Because if I did not, he said, finally, I am afraid that one day I would take it down from the shelf and find that I did not feel anything. That is the only thing I have left to be afraid of, Miss Bennett. I have buried everything else. So I take it down every night, and as long as I feel something, I put it back. Aria set her milk down on the corner of the desk. She did not know what she was about to do until she was doing it. She walked across the room to him, and she stopped at arm's length, and she reached out and she took his hand. She didn't hold it hard. She didn't lace her fingers with his. She just took it, her palm in his palm. The tattoo on the inside of his wrist was a word in a script she couldn't read, small and black, and up close she could see that it was a name. Matteo, he said, quietly, seeing where she was looking. In his mother's handwriting. She wrote his name on a piece of paper when he was born, a note to a nurse, and I kept the paper. It is a very strange thing to have done. I did not know I had done it until I found it in a coat pocket a year later. I had it put on my skin because it was the last thing she had written that had nothing to do with being afraid. Aria didn't say anything. After a long second, Lucian looked down at their hands. I do not know what this is, he said. Neither do I. I want to tell you to go back to your room. I know. I'm going to tell you to go back to your room. I know. Miss Bennett, don't call me that right now. Aria. Yes. Go back to your room, please. She let go of his hand. She picked up her milk. She walked to the door. At the door she turned because she had to, and he was still standing in front of the shelf, in his gray robe with his hands hanging loose at his sides, watching her. Lucienne. Yes. If you ever take that picture down and you don't feel anything, come and find me, okay? Don't stop taking it down. Just come and find me. She didn't wait for him to answer. She walked down the hall. She went back down the stairs. She went to bed. She did not drink the milk. She lay in the dark for a long time. She did not sleep well either that night, but she slept better than she had in a year. The week after the study, the phone calls started. The first one came at 3 a.m. She heard Lucienne's voice through the house, not loud, but carrying, the way a voice carries at 3 a.m. in a big quiet place. He was on the phone. He was speaking Italian. She did not know Italian, but she knew the rhythm of bad news. In the morning, at breakfast, he was already at the table when she came down with Ethan. His eyes were bloodshot. He had not changed his shirt from the night before. Sophia gave him a look that was almost a scolding and put a plate of eggs in front of him that he ate half of, and he pushed the rest toward Ethan, and Ethan ate them with the serious concentration of a boy who had decided that eating Mr. Moretti's extra food was one of his jobs. After Ethan went off to the classroom with Elena, Aria looked across the table at Lucian. Who called? A cousin of mine. Good news or bad? Bad. Can I ask? He considered her. He wasn't used to the new thing between them yet. Neither, clearly, was he. They had been careful all week. Too careful. She had not touched his hand since the study. She had not been alone with him for longer than 3 minutes at a time. They looked at each other and then looked away. They said good morning and good night and nothing in between that was not strictly logistical. And still, at 3 a.m, when a phone had rung in a part of the house she had never been to, she had heard his voice and known it was his. A man who works for me, he said, has been arrested. For what? Nothing good. The how and the what of it is not important to you. The important thing is that the police are looking into some matters. Some of those matters touch me. They are not likely to find anything. I have spent many years making sure that they could not, but they will look. And for a little while, there will be noise. What kind of noise? Men watching the gate, cars that drive past the property more often than usual, perhaps a warrant or two. Nothing that will trouble you or the boy. You will not see any of it, but I would be lying if I told you nothing had changed. So it's worse here suddenly. No, not worse, just noisier. She looked at him. Lucienne. Yes. Are we a problem for you, being here, if the police are going to be paying attention? No. If they're looking at your business and you've got a woman and a child in your house who have no reason to be here, you have every reason to be here. Lucienne, you are not a problem. Stop it. If I left right now, would it be easier for you? Yes. She blinked. I'm not going to lie to you, he said. It would be simpler for the next month if you were not here. Simpler is not better. Simpler is simpler. I do not want simpler. I do not want simpler at any price. I want you and the boy safe. The boy is safe here. He is safer here than he would be in any other building in this city, with or without noise. I am telling you the truth. It is noisier here now than it was yesterday. I am also telling you the truth that I do not care, and that you should not go. Aria sat back in her chair. I don't know how to live somewhere where it's noisier means the police are about to pay attention. No, you don't. That is fair. I've never had anything in my life that could be taken away by a newspaper. I know. You have a lot of things that can be taken away by a newspaper. I do. And you've still got me and Ethan in your house. Yes. Why? He didn't answer right away. He looked at the empty chair where Ethan had been. He looked at her. Because the alternative, he said, is a house without you and Ethan in it. And I have lived in that house for 12 years, and I have decided that I do not care to live in it anymore. Aria did not know what to say to that. She got up. She cleared the plates. Sophia came in and tried to take them out of her hands, and Aria shook her head, not rudely, just firmly, and Sophia, for the first time, let her. She carried the plates to the sink. She stood at the sink and she let the water run hot on her hands, and she did not look at Lucien Moretti, and she did not leave the room. After a while, he got up. He walked past her. He stopped at the door of the kitchen. He did not turn around. The noise will pass, he said, in a month or two. I have handled noise before. I know you have. I will not let any of it touch you. I know. Aria. Yes. Thank you. For what? For not going. She did not turn around. She kept her hands in the hot water until she heard him walk away down the hall. Then she shut off the tap. She stood there for another long minute, and then she dried her hands on a dish towel, and she went to find her nephew. The noise did not pass in a month or two. Neither she nor Lucien knew that yet. The two of them stood in that kitchen on that morning thinking they had crossed the hardest part of what was between them and the rest of their lives. And outside the window, past the hedges, past the cypresses, past the pond with its 8 ducks, a man in a dark sedan was already parked at the mouth of the long driveway pretending to read a map, and a telephone was already ringing in an office in a building 12 miles away where a thin, polite, very patient man named Sergeant Brennan was about to write Aria Bennett's name down on a new kind of list. The kitchen was quiet. The light was good. The radiator ticked. Somewhere down the hall, a 6-year-old boy was laughing at something his teacher had said, and it sounded, from where Aria was standing, like a small bright bell ringing in a house that had not, for a very long time, had any bells in it at all. The bell she heard that morning was the last ordinary sound the house would make for a while. The sedan at the mouth of the driveway was gone by afternoon. In its place, by the time Aria walked Ethan down to the pond after lunch, was a different car, a gray one. A little farther up the shoulder, pointed the other direction. She saw it from the terrace before they left, and she pretended not to see it, because Ethan was holding her hand and telling her about a book Elena had read to him about a whale who lived under a city, and she did not want the whale to get replaced in his head by a gray car. At the pond, one of Lucien's men was already there, not up close. Standing in the line of the cypress trees, in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, watching nothing in particular. Aria recognized him vaguely. A broad man with a shaved head, who she'd seen in the kitchen one morning drinking coffee like the coffee had offended him. He nodded to her without smiling. She nodded back. Ethan didn't notice. The ducks came up through the reeds in their usual crooked parade, and Ethan shouted their names in the cold air, Mr. Bread, Miss Bread, Baby Bread. And the man in the cypresses stood there with his hands in his pockets, and Aria fed the ducks with her nephew, and thought, this is what noise looks like, and kept smiling so her face wouldn't show anything else. That night, Lucien did not come to dinner. Aria ate with Ethan at the long table, and the 2 quiet men at the far end did not speak, and Sophia moved plates in and out and did not meet her eyes. When Aria asked, as lightly as she could manage, where Mr. Moretti was tonight, Sophia said only, "He is working, Miss Aria. He asks you to please eat well." "Is he in the house?" "He is in the house." "Is everything all right?" Sophia hesitated. It was the first time Aria had ever seen her hesitate on a simple answer. "He is working," she said again, and took the breadbasket away. Aria put Ethan to bed at 8:30. He asked about Mr. Moretti 3 times. She told him Mr. Moretti was busy tonight, but they would see him in the morning, and Ethan said okay in a voice that did not quite believe her but had learned already, in a new way, that grown-ups had business sometimes, and you did not press. He went to sleep with the rabbit back under his arm. At 9:15, she walked down to the big door at the end of the corridor past the library. It was the door to the long room with the oak table and the fireplace, the room she had walked into unannounced the day of the printed articles. She stopped at the door. She lifted her hand to knock. She didn't. She could hear voices through the wood, men's voices, more than 4. Lucien's among them, low and even. Someone was angry, not shouting, but the hot, pressed-down anger of a man who is not allowed to shout. She heard a chair scrape. She heard someone say her name. She stepped back from the door before she could hear more. She walked back to the east wing very slowly, the way you walk when you do not want your footsteps to sound like retreat. The next morning, Lucien was at the kitchen table at 6, in a dark suit she had not seen before, with a stack of folders by his coffee cup and a pair of glasses she had also not seen before pushed up on his head. Reading glasses. It was the first time she had ever thought of him as a man who might need glasses. It made him older. It made him real. "You're up early," he said, without looking up from the folder. "So are you." "I did not go to bed." "Okay. There's coffee." She poured a cup. She sat down. He worked. She watched him work. He was making notes in the margins of a document in a small, tight hand, and every so often he pulled a page out and set it on a second stack. After a while, she couldn't stand it anymore. "Lucien." "Yes." "Are you going to tell me what is happening?" He set the pen down. He pushed the glasses off his forehead and down his nose, and he looked at her over them, and she understood for the first time what it felt like to be on the other side of the table when he was paying attention. "Yes, I will tell you now." "Okay. My cousin's arrest is the first of what will likely be several. There is an effort being made at the level of the state police and possibly of the federal government to take apart a certain set of businesses with which I have been associated for many years. The effort has been building for some time. It is not about me, specifically. It is about a larger, an older set of arrangements between families, some of whom I have worked with and some of whom I have not. But the net they are throwing is a wide one. My name will be on it. It was always going to be. When? Soon, within weeks. A grand jury has already been convened. A prosecutor I know by name has been asking questions I have been working very hard to have unasked. He is not being deterred. What happens to you? Many things are possible. Lucien, I will not lie to you. I may be charged. I may be arrested. Most likely I will not be convicted. I have been preparing for this for 10 years. I have lawyers who eat men like this prosecutor for breakfast. But between the charge and the acquittal, there is a period in which I am not here, in which I cannot be here, in which my house is not mine in the way it is mine now, in which there are men with cameras at the gate and agents at the door and noise, a great deal of noise. She let out a breath she hadn't known she'd been holding. How long is that period? Months, perhaps longer. I have been in a federal detention center before, for 11 weeks when I was younger. It was not a pleasant time, but it was a survivable one. That is not, however, the point. What is the point? He pulled out a folder from the bottom of his stack and laid it on the table between them. The point, Aria, is that you and Ethan cannot be in this house when that happens. She stared at the folder. What is this? It is a set of options. I have been working on it since the night I told you my cousin had been arrested. It contains 3 possibilities. The first, a house in a town about 600 miles from here, under a different name. New documents, a small income, a school for the boy. Sophia has a cousin in that town who would look in on you. It is quiet. No one would find you. A different name. Yes, as in witness protection, just without the government. Better than the government. The government is a bureaucracy. I am not. What's option 2? Your mother's house in Oregon, with a security detail. 2 men, discreet, paid by me for as long as is necessary. Your mother has already been prepared for the possibility. She is willing. She was, in fact, the one who suggested offense, though she used the word in a way that made it clear she was not entirely joking. Aria barked out a laugh that surprised her. She wiped her eye with the back of her hand. Of course she did. She is a formidable woman. She has 2 stents and a bad knee. Still formidable. What's option 3? He paused. Option 3 is a house on the coast, far from here, out of the country. A house I have kept for many years through a name that does not connect to mine in any document that anyone can find. Sophia and Pellegrini would go with you. Elena, if she wished.
It is it is not a hiding place. It is a kind of life. You would not be a guest. You would be running the house in your own name for however long you wanted to be there. Out of the country? Yes.
Ethan is a United States citizen, Lucian. I can't. Dual papers. Legal. I'm not asking you to smuggle him anywhere, but the papers take time, and if we are to do it, I need to start now. She stared at him. Which one do you want? I do not have a preference. Lucien. Aria. Don't do the I do not have a preference thing. Please, for me, once. Tell me what you want. He looked at her for a long moment. He took his glasses off entirely and set them on the folder. He laced his fingers together on top of them. He didn't look away. I want option 3, he said quietly. I want you and the boy in a house on a coast that I know, in a country I can get to with one passport and no airline tickets, with people around you I trust, waiting for me until the noise has passed. I want that. Very badly. It is option 3, but you did not ask me which one was best for you. You asked me which one I wanted, and what I want is not the point of this conversation. Aria put her hands flat on the table. Her eyes were burning. She did not let it show. If you get arrested, if you go away, will I know? Yes. Can I come back? When it is safe, yes. Will you want me to? He did not answer right away. She watched him breathe. Yes, he said, but I will not ask you to. You will decide. Okay. I need a day. You can have more than a day. I know, but I only need a day. She spent that day in the garden. It was the end of February, and the garden was not yet alive, but there was a thin sun, and the gardener, a man she had seen once or twice without knowing his name, a small, weathered man with a faded blue cap, had started turning the beds, and the dirt was black and wet and smelled the way dirt was supposed to smell. Aria put on a pair of boots Sophia had left in the mudroom. She pulled Ethan's coat on him and zipped it up to his chin. They walked out past the terrace and down the slope to the cypress trees and back again, and Ethan collected pebbles in his pocket. And she thought about the 3 options in the folder, and she knew by 11 o'clock in the morning that she was going to pick option 3, and she knew by noon that she was not ready to tell Lucien, and by 1 she had stopped thinking about the folder and had started thinking about the study. The photograph of the boy with the grass stains on his knees, the word on his wrist in a mother's handwriting. Come and find me. She had said that. If you ever take that picture down and you don't feel anything, come and find me. She had said it out loud, in her own voice, standing in a doorway holding a glass of milk. And he had not come to find her. She had not expected him to. But she had also, somewhere, expected that the sentence would stay in the room with both of them, and that when he had come down that next morning with his bloodshot eyes, he would have looked at her differently. He had not. He had looked at her exactly the same. He had said good morning. He had asked about Ethan's sleep. He had gone on as if she had never put her hand in his. She understood now, walking in the garden, that he had done that on purpose. He had decided, at some point between the study and the kitchen, that he was not going to take what she had offered him. Whether out of honor or out of fear or out of some third thing she did not have a name for, he had set that night aside and he had closed the door on it, and he had been very careful since not to be in a room with her in which that door could be opened again. And now he was telling her to leave. She understood that too. She was not going to make it easy for him. At 3 o'clock, Ethan got tired, and she carried him back up to the house on her hip and laid him on the couch in the library. And she covered him with a wool blanket that smelled like cedar, and she sat next to him while he fell asleep. And when his breathing went long and slow, she got up and walked out of the library and went to find Lucien. He was in the long room with the oak table. The door was open this time. He was at the head of the table alone, 2 documents open in front of him, the glasses back on. She walked in. He looked up. I picked 3, she said. I want to do it right, but if it's all right with you, I want to stay in this house until you tell me to go. Not a day before. If you're arrested tomorrow morning, Ethan and I will be on a plane that afternoon, not before. I want to eat dinner with you tonight. I want to feed the ducks tomorrow. I want to read a book in your library the day after that. If the noise comes for us in the middle of that, we'll go. But I'm not going to pre-grieve a thing that hasn't happened yet. I've done enough of that in my life. I'm not going to do it again. He set down the glasses. All right. All right. All right. That's it? That is it. I am agreeing with you. Oh. I will begin the papers for the boy today. They will be ready when we need them. Until then, we will live. Until then, we will live. Yes. Okay. Aria. Yes. Thank you. For what? For not making me say goodbye to you in a folder. She walked out before she could do anything she'd regret. They had 4 more days. They were, she would think later, the best 4 days of her adult life. Not because anything extraordinary happened in them. Because nothing did. She ate breakfast with Lucien at the kitchen table. She walked Ethan to the pond in the morning and in the afternoon. She sat in the library and read a novel. The first novel she had opened in 3 years. And she did not finish it, but she got far enough to start caring about the woman in it, which was farther than she had gotten into any novel since Maggie had died. Lucien taught Ethan, with great seriousness and a lot of wrong answers, how to play chess. Sophia made a soup on the second day that made Ethan cry the good kind of tears because he said it tasted like his mother's. Pellegrini came by to remove the last butterfly bandage, which was a ceremony Aria had not known she was going to need, and when he peeled it off and pronounced her officially not his patient anymore, Aria kissed him on the cheek, which startled him so badly that he actually blushed, and then she kissed him on the other cheek for good measure. On the third night, after Ethan had gone to sleep, Lucy came to the doorway of the library where she was reading, and he stood there without speaking until she looked up, and then he said, "Would you walk with me?" "Now?" "Now." "Where?" "Just around. The lawn. I have not been out in 2 days. I need the air." She got up. She put her book face down on the arm of the chair. She fetched a coat. They walked out the terrace door into the cold and down the slope, and he put his hands in his pockets, and she put hers in hers, and they walked side by side down to the pond without speaking, and stood there at the edge of the reeds, looking out over the black water. After a while, he said, "Do you know, I have walked around this lawn perhaps 10,000 times in 12 years, and I have never once walked it with another person." "Never?" "No." 10,000 times alone." "Yes." "That's a lot of alone." It was the point. She looked at his profile in the dark. The cold had put color in his cheeks. He looked younger than he was. He looked tired. "Lucien." "Yes. I'm not going to ask you to promise me anything. I know better. I know you don't promise anything to anyone, including yourself. But if you come out the other side of this, and you want to, I want you to know I'll be on that coast. Not waiting. I don't wait well. I'll be living. But I'll be there. And if you show up, I'll be glad you did." He did not turn his head. "I may not come." "I know." "It may be years." "I know. You may find that the man who shows up is not the same man you are walking with now." "Lucien." "Yes. I watched you teach my nephew to put a pawn where a bishop should go and then let him win anyway. I don't have any illusions about who you are. I'm not in love with some fantasy of a dangerous man. I know what you do. I know what you are. I'm telling you that when the dangerous man is done being dangerous, he should come to the coast." A long silence. Then very quietly he said, "All right." "All right?" "Yes." "That's 2 all rights from you in a week. I'm starting a collection." "You are a terrible woman." "I know." She reached out in the dark. She found his sleeve. She slid her hand down his sleeve and into his hand and held it for a second, and he held hers, and the ducks were asleep on the far bank somewhere, and neither of them spoke again until they had walked back up the slope and into the house. The 4th day began with sirens. Not close. Far. A thin rising and falling sound somewhere on the other side of the hedges. Aria was in the kitchen with Ethan spreading butter on toast when she heard it, and she didn't pay attention to it at first, because the property was large and sirens meant other people's trouble almost by definition. Then Sophia came in, very fast, without her apron on. That was the thing that told Aria. Sophia was never without her apron. "Miss Aria, please, come with me. Bring the boy." "What's happening?" "Please,
Mr. Moretti asks. Aria didn't argue. She lifted Ethan off his stool. She grabbed his coat off the back of the chair. She followed Sophia down the hall, not toward the east wing, toward the front of the house. They passed two men she had never seen before, in black tactical vests, standing in the main corridor with radios in their hands. She did not ask. She did not slow down. Sophia, the gate, Miss Aria. Some men at the gate. Police? We do not know yet. Maybe. Maybe not. Mr. Moretti says the basement. The basement. It is comfortable, please. She carried Ethan down 2 flights of stairs behind Sophia. The basement was not what she expected. It was a long, warm room with rugs on the floor and a small kitchen and 2 couches and a television on a shelf, and it had no windows. Elena was already there, sitting on one of the couches, with her hands folded in her lap. She stood when they came in. Aria. Elena. It will be all right. What is happening? A car drove through the gate. 2 men in the car. They are not police. Mr. Moretti is dealing with it. 2 men. Yes. From where? Elena hesitated. Then she said gently, From Hartwell, we think. Aria went cold all over. She set Ethan on the couch. She knelt in front of him. She took his face in both her hands. Her own hands, she noticed with a strange clarity, were not shaking. Ethan, baby, listen to me. We're going to sit in this room for a little while. It's warm. There are books. Miss Elena is going to read with you. I have to go help Mr. Moretti for a second, okay? No. Baby. No, you stay. Ethan, you stay with me. His voice broke on it. He grabbed her wrists with both hands. His hands were so small and so strong, and his face was collapsing, and she had not seen him look like this since the night Derek had kicked her door in, and she almost couldn't speak. Okay, she said. Okay, baby, I'll stay. I'll stay. I'm not going anywhere. She sat down on the couch. She pulled him into her lap. He put his face in her neck. He didn't cry. He just shook, very small, very tight, and she held him, and Elena sat on the couch across from them with her hands folded and did not move, and Sophia went to the door and stood with her back to it like she was going to personally hold the door shut with her shoulder if she had to. They sat like that for 47 minutes. Aria knew how long it was because there was a clock on the shelf above the television, and she watched the minute hand, and she did not let herself look away from the minute hand. Because if she let herself look away from the minute hand, she was going to start imagining what was happening upstairs. And if she started imagining, she was going to start screaming. Minute 31 was the only time she heard gunfire. It was far away. It was small. It sounded like a string of firecrackers some neighborhood kids had set off 2 streets over. 4 pops, maybe 5, and then nothing. Ethan didn't seem to hear it. Elena met her eyes. Sophia at the door closed hers briefly and crossed herself and opened them again. At minute 47, there was a knock on the basement door. 3 short knocks, a pause, 2 more. Sophia exhaled. She unlocked the door. The man with the shaved head came in. The one from the cypress trees. He had blood on the sleeve of his coat and a long scratch down the side of his face. He looked at Aria. Miss Bennett, Mr. Moretti asks that you come upstairs, please. He is in the front hall. He is fine. He wanted you to hear that from him. Is anyone hurt? No one from the house. The men. One is alive. One is not. Which one? The one who is alive will be going to a hospital shortly. I believe he was the driver. And the other? The other was a man named Caleb Pryor. He was a friend of Mr. Roy Wells. Mr. Moretti asks me to tell you this because he says you would want to know the name, and that no one else will know it from now on, because the matter will be closed very quickly. Aria nodded. She did not feel anything. She was going to feel something later, she knew. Not now. She lifted Ethan off her lap. She stood him on the floor. She knelt in front of him again. Baby, Mr. Moretti is fine. I'm going to go see him for a second. I'm going to come right back. Is it okay if you stay here with Miss Elena for 5 minutes? Just 5. 5. 5. I'll be back before you finish a book with her. He nodded. She kissed his forehead. She followed the man with the shaved head up the stairs. The front hall was a mess. A glass panel in one of the big double doors was shattered,
and there was broken glass on the marble floor in a long scatter. Something had been knocked off the wall. A picture, she thought. She couldn't tell. Two men were carrying a third man out through a side door. The third man in a kind of heavy black bag that she forced herself not to look at for long enough to understand. A fourth man stood at the foot of the staircase with a radio pressed to his ear, talking in Italian, fast. The air smelled like gunpowder and cold air from the broken door. Lucian was standing in the middle of the hall. He was in shirt sleeves. He had not been wearing a coat when whatever had happened had happened. There was blood on the front of his shirt, a long streak of it, not his. She could tell it wasn't his because he was standing there completely upright and his color was good. His right hand was wrapped loosely around his left wrist. There was a graze on the knuckles of his left hand. His hair had come down over his forehead. He was breathing a little hard. He turned when she came in. For a second, he didn't say anything. For a second, neither did she. Then she crossed the hall, through the glass, in her slippers. She noticed later that she had glass embedded in the rubber sole. She didn't feel it at the time. And she walked up to him and she put both hands on his chest, flat, and she pushed him, not hard, but she pushed him. And she said in a voice that surprised her, "You were in a gunfight in your front hall." "Yes."
You were in a gunfight in your own house, Lucian. Yes. I was in the basement. Yes. With a 6-year-old. Yes. I don't know what to do with this. I know. Are you okay? Yes. Is that someone's blood on you? It is not mine. Whose is it? It does not matter. She stared at him. She had her hands on his chest, and she could feel his heart. It was going fast, much faster than his face. Lucien. Yes.
"We are leaving tonight."
Yes. We are leaving tonight. Yes, Aria, yes. I am not spending one more night in a house where men can drive a car through the gate. I know. Can you do that? Tonight? Yes, it was already prepared. I had hoped we would have another week. We do not. It can be done in 6 hours. 6 hours. Yes. Okay. Okay. She stepped back from them. She looked down at her hands. There was blood on her palms from his shirt. Just a little. She stared at it for a second. Lucien. Yes. I'm sorry I pushed you. You did not push me. I pushed you. You touched me. There is a difference. I am extremely close to a nervous breakdown right now, and I don't know if you know that, but I just want to say it out loud so one of us has said it out loud. I know. Okay. Go to the boy? Yes. Aria. Yes. When I come down. In 6 hours. I will be on the plane with you. She looked at him. You said you couldn't leave. I said many things. Some of them were true when I said them. They are not true anymore. The men in that car were sent by the brother of the man in Hartwell, who is now awake, and who has been speaking to people he should not have been speaking to. A line has been crossed today in a way that I did not anticipate so soon. If I stay in this country for one more week, I will spend the next 5 years in a courtroom explaining a pile of bodies. If I go tonight, I will spend those same 5 years in a house on a coast. I have made my choice. I'm not asking you for a thing. I'm telling you that I'm getting on the same plane. Lucien. Yes. Don't do this because of me. I am not. If you are. Aria. He said her name very softly, blood on his shirt, glass at his feet. I am doing this because the man I was at 20 would have stayed and burned his life down in front of a jury and called it honor. I am not 20 anymore. I am tired. I have a reason to be tired that is worth tiring for. That is you. That is the boy. That is not you making me do anything. That is you being somewhere and me walking toward it. Do you understand the difference? She swallowed. Yes. Good. Okay. Go to the boy. She went. Done. 6 hours was not enough. 6 hours was all they had. She packed 2 duffel bags. Ethan's clothes, his rabbit, the drawings he had made. Her own clothes. Most of them clothes that were not even hers. Clothes Sophia had put in her closet in the first week.
clothes that fit her perfectly in a way that suggested someone had been paying close attention to her. The tin box with Maggie's birth certificate and the custody papers. A framed photograph of Ethan and Maggie that she had kept on her nightstand since she'd gotten to the house. Sophia and Pellegrini packed in an hour with the kind of speed that suggested they had been packed, in a sense, for years. Elena packed in 40 minutes and cried once, very quietly, in the hallway, and then stopped and did not cry again. Aria called her mother. "Mom? Honey, we're leaving tonight. Okay? I don't know. I don't know when I can call again. It might be a few days, it might be 2 weeks. I don't want you to worry. I'm safe. Ethan's safe. We're going somewhere. I can't say where." "Okay. Okay? That's it? Mom, I told you I was going off the grid. You didn't yell at me." Aria. "Yes. The polite man asked me a month ago what I would do if you left the country. I told him I would pack a bag and come with you. He told me very gently that I could not come with you. I cried. Then I yelled at him. Then I hung up on him. Then I called him back and told him I was sorry, and he said I had nothing to be sorry for, and then he sent me a basket, Aria, of something called panettone, which I had never heard of, and I have been eating it for 3 weeks and gaining weight. I have had a lot of time to do my yelling. I am done yelling. Get on the plane. Call me when you can. Don't let Ethan forget who his grandmother is. That is all I am asking. Jim,
Mom, I love you. I love you. Go." She went. At 10 o'clock at night, she stood with Ethan on her hip at the bottom of the staircase in the front hall. The glass had been swept. The broken panel had been covered with a piece of board. Sophia and Elena were already in one of the cars in the driveway. Pellegrini was putting a small leather bag in the trunk of another. 2 of Lucien's men stood at the door in their coats and did not look at her. Lucien came down the stairs. He had changed his shirt. He was in a dark coat. He was carrying nothing but a small black duffel and the photograph from the study, wrapped in a silk scarf, tucked under his arm. He stopped on the last step. "Ready. Ready." Ethan, in her arms, leaned out toward him. It was the first time he had ever done it. Aria felt it in her chest. Lucien, without saying anything, stepped off the last stair and took the boy. Ethan put his cheek on Lucien's shoulder. He did not cry. He did not look afraid. He said in a small, sleepy voice, "Are we going on a plane?" "Yes." "Will it be loud?" "A little." "Will you be with me?" "Yes." "Okay." Lucien carried him out through the broken door and Aria followed, and the cold air hit her face, and out on the gravel she stopped for a second and looked back at the house. The lights were still on in half the windows. Smoke was rising from one of the chimneys. It looked like a place she had lived in for a long time. It occurred to her, standing there with her duffel bag over her shoulder, that she had been in this house for less than 2 months. It had felt like years. It had felt like a life. She got in the car. Lucien got in after her, Ethan still against his shoulder. The doors shut. The engine started. The car rolled down the long gravel drive, past the gate, repaired already, the damaged panel gone, past the spot where the sedan had sat reading a map, past the line of cypress trees she could just barely see in the dark. Out on the county road, she leaned her head against the cold window, and she felt Lucien's free hand find hers across the seat, and she laced her fingers with his for the first time, and she closed her eyes. On the tarmac, later, under the white lights of a private hangar, with the plane's engines already running, she stood at the bottom of the stairs with Ethan asleep in her arms and watched Lucien Moretti speak quietly in Italian to a man in a pilot's uniform and watched the man nod. She watched Sophia hand Elena a paper cup of coffee. She watched Pellegrini check his watch. She watched her own life, her whole small battered life, move without her permission onto a different shelf in the world. Then Lucien came back to her. He put his hand on the small of her back. He said, "After you." And she carried her nephew up the stairs, and Lucien followed her, and the door of the plane closed behind them with a soft, clean sound, and a minute later the plane began to move. And the house she had been afraid to leave was already miles behind her, and the coast she had never seen was many hours ahead, and Ethan did not wake up, not once, the entire time. The plane landed on a runway Aria could not see, in a country she had been told the name of and had already half forgotten,
a little after dawn. She had not slept on the flight. Ethan had slept the whole way, curled into her on the big leather seat with his rabbit under one arm, and Lucien had sat across from them for a while and then moved to a seat at the front of the cabin and made phone calls for 3 hours in a voice so low she could not have heard the words, even if she had spoken the language. When the wheels touched down, Ethan did not wake up. The light through the window was the color of a ripe peach. The house was 40 minutes from the airport, on a narrow road that ran along a cliff, and when the car turned in through a pair of old iron gates and down a short driveway of crushed white stone, Aria did not at first understand that this was where they were stopping. It did not look like anything she had imagined. It was not enormous. It was old. Older than Lucien's house in the city by 100 years at least. A long, low stone building with a red tile roof and green shutters. A lemon tree on one side of the courtyard and an olive tree on the other, and beyond it, past a waist-high stone wall, a sudden and extraordinary absence. The cliff, the drop, the sea. "Oh," she said. It came out small. "Yes." "Lucien." "Yes." This is the house you kept under another name for 12 years." "Yes." I don't know what I thought. A bunker, a concrete thing, something built to hide in. I have one of those as well. This one is for something else." "For what?" "I did not know until yesterday." She didn't ask him to finish the sentence. She got out of the car with Ethan still asleep in her arms, and the smell of the air hit her, salt and lemon and old stone warmed by morning sun. And she stood in the courtyard for a long moment and just breathed. And Ethan woke up against her neck and said, into her hair, very softly, "Aunt Ari, it smells nice here." "It does, baby." "Is this where we live now?" She looked at Lucien over the top of Ethan's head. "For a while," she said. "Yeah, this is where we live for a while. The first month was the strangest. Not bad. Strange. The kind of strange that happens when a body that has been running for a year and a half suddenly is allowed to stop running and does not know what to do with itself. Aria slept 9 hours a night and woke up tired. She ate too much bread. She cried once in the shower for no reason she could put words to, and then did not cry again for 6 months. Ethan, who had been talking in careful sentences at the estate, suddenly started talking in paragraphs, whole streams of words about the rocks by the water, about a cat that came by the back door, about a fisherman he had seen from the cliff who had waved at him. And Aria listened to him talk and thought, this is what he sounds like when he is not afraid, and she had to sit down sometimes to hear it. Lucien was gone a lot that first month. He would leave early and come back at night, or he would be gone for 2 days, or he would be in a room in the back of the house for 12 hours with the door closed and 2 men she did not know and a stack of phones on a table. He was unwinding a life. It was a bigger life than she had known, and it had more edges than she had imagined, and some of the edges cut. And some of the people he had to speak to were people who were not happy to hear that he was leaving the work to them. And there were nights he came to dinner with a bruise on his jaw he did not explain, and she did not ask about. She did not ask him much in that first month. She let him come and go. She built a life around the edges of his absences. She walked Ethan down the goat path to the rocky beach every morning. She learned the woman's name at the little market in the village, a wide-hipped woman named Rosa, who taught her the words for bread, eggs, thank you, and my son, in that order. She corrected the word. Rosa smiled and said, yes, your son, yes, and did not correct her back. Sophia settled into the house as if she had been waiting her whole life to settle into this house in particular. She took over the kitchen the first morning without asking anyone, and by the second week she had rearranged the pantry and befriended the butcher and hired a local girl named Chiara to come in 3 days a week to help with the laundry and the floors. Pellegrini took the smallest guest room, set up a desk in the corner, and began, to Aria's quiet astonishment, to write a book, a medical memoir, he said, in a tone that suggested he had been planning it for 20 years. Elena, who had come because she had wanted to and not because anyone had asked her, taught Ethan in the mornings at the long kitchen table. In the afternoons, she walked down to the village and sat in the square with a sketchbook, and after a couple of months, she started painting. Not for sale, just to paint. And then quietly, people started buying them. And by the end of the first year, she had a small local gallery that knew her by name. It was a life. They were making a life.
Not one of them had expected to be making a life here, but they were. The day Aria knew, for sure, that she and Lucien were not going to be polite about each other anymore was a Tuesday in late April.
It was a small thing. He had been gone 3 days. He came back at dusk, dusty from the road, and she was in the courtyard putting tomato plants into pots because Sophia had bullied her into it, and he walked in through the gate and saw her and stopped. He had a cut on his eyebrow that had not been there 3 days before. He looked at her for a second and then he said, "I'm sorry I have not been here." "You were working." "I was working." "Don't apologize." "I want to apologize." "Lucien."
"Yes, it's fine." "It is not fine. I had told you at the house that I would not make you wait, that I would come to the coast and I would be on the coast. I am on the coast only 3 days in 7. That is not what I told you." "It's been a month." "Yes." "You're unwinding an entire life." "Yes." "It's going to take longer than a month."
"I know that." "Aria." "Yes." "I'm going to stop going."
"What?"
"After tomorrow. I have one more meeting, the day after tomorrow, in the city nearest this one. After that, I am going to stop going. The rest can be done on phones, by other people. I have spent 12 years being the person who went. I have decided I do not want to be that person anymore." She stood up from the tomato plants. Her hands were covered in black dirt. She wiped them on her jeans, which were not hers originally, but which she had stopped thinking of as not hers around week 2.
"Why?"
"Because I have a courtyard I have not yet planted tomatoes in, and I have not eaten dinner at a table that has the boy at it in 6 days, and I am 51 years old, and I have spent 30 of those years in meetings with men who do not matter to me. I'm tired of being in a room with men who do not matter to me. I would like to plant the tomatoes."
She stared at him. "You have never planted a tomato in your life." "No." "You will be bad at it." "Almost certainly."
"You will be very bad at it, Lucien."
"Yes."
She walked across the courtyard. She put her dirty hands flat against the front of his shirt, and she left 2 dark prints on the white cotton, and she did it on purpose. "Then come home," she said, "and be bad at it, with me." He looked down at the dirt on his shirt. He looked up at her. He didn't kiss her. Not then. He just put his hand on her cheek for a second, his thumb on the small pink line that was all that was left of the cut over her cheekbone, and he said, "All right." He was home the Friday of that week. He did not stop being busy. There were still phone calls in the back room. There were still 3 men in the kitchen on Wednesdays drinking coffee with him for an hour before they drove back to the airport. A man named Pietro, who Aria eventually realized was something like a second-in-command, came every other week for about 6 months. A small dark man with a soft voice who brought small gifts for Ethan and never looked her in the face for more than a second. These things did not stop, but Lucien stopped going. He had the work come to him, and he was home for dinner every night. It changed the house. It changed Ethan first, which was how Aria saw it. The boy had been better since the first week at the estate, but the kind of better a child is when he is still watching the exits. Now, with Lucien at the dinner table 7 nights out of 7, Ethan stopped watching. Not on purpose. He just stopped. He started asking Lucien questions he had been saving up for weeks. He started leaving his drawings on Lucien's desk in the back room instead of on Aria's bedside table. He started sitting on the step outside the back room at 5 in the afternoon, waiting for the door to open. One Sunday in June, when Ethan was 7 years old and had been living in the house for almost 4 months, the 3 of them were at the kitchen table eating lunch. Sophia was at the stove. Pellegrini had gone to the village. Elena was in the courtyard painting the lemon tree. Ethan was eating a bowl of pasta, and something he was thinking about was making his forehead crease in the particular way it did when he was about to ask a question that was going to rearrange a room. Aunt Ari.
"Yes, baby." "Is Lucien my dad now?" She set her fork down very carefully. Across the table, Lucien went very still. "Baby," Aria said after a second. Lucien is Lucien. He loves you. He's here. Whether he's your dad, that's a word. It's a word you can use if you want to. It's a word you don't have to use if you don't want to. Nobody is going to tell you you have to." Ethan thought about that for a long moment. He twirled his fork in his pasta.
"Okay," he said. "Then I want to use it. Okay? Is that okay with you, Lucien?"
Lucien had to wait a second before answering. Aria saw it in his throat. When he spoke, his voice was rough, but he kept it level, which she knew by then was the hardest thing he did. Yes, Ethan, that is okay with me. Okay, Dad. And he kept eating. He ate his whole bowl of pasta and then asked for another, and Sophia, who had been frozen at the stove with a spoon in her hand, put a hand briefly over her eyes and then served him another bowl. Aria, sitting across the table from a man she had known for 5 months, watched that man try very hard not to cry into his lunch, and she did not help him. She let him do it himself. She thought it was important that he do it himself. She reached across the table and took his hand. He squeezed it. He ate his lunch. That evening, after Ethan was in bed, Lucien and Aria walked out to the wall at the edge of the courtyard and looked at the sea. The sun had gone down. The sky was very dark blue and there were 2 ships' lights on the water, far out. I did not think, Lucien said after a long time, that a child would ever call me that again. I know. I did not know what it would feel like. I know. It hurts. I know. It is a good hurt, mostly. Yeah? Aria. Yes. I think I would like, at some point, when you are ready, I think I would like to marry you. She laughed. She couldn't help it. It came out of her before she could stop it. What? Was that a bad way to say it? It was a... Lucienne. It was... Yes, it was a bad way to say it. I think I would like, at some point. You sound like you're putting in a maintenance request. I am very out of practice. You clearly are. Will you? Eventually. Eventually. Yes, eventually. Not today. Not next week. Probably not this year. Ethan just used a word he has not used in a very long time. And I don't want to stack things on top of each other and have him think he has to use any other words before he's ready. I want him to have just that one word for a while. Just Dad. Nothing else. Not Mom married the dad. Not the new family. Just, I have a dad now. For a while, okay? Okay. And then, when he's used to that, I will marry you. You will? Yes. I'm telling you in advance so you can stop being nervous about it and plant your terrible tomatoes in peace. Aria. Yes. I love you. It was, she realized, the first time he had said it out loud. She thought about saying it back. She thought about all the ways she could have said it back. She went with, I know. He laughed. It was the first time she had ever heard him laugh. It was a short, low laugh that came out of him almost by accident, and it sounded, from where she was standing, like something a lot of years had been sitting on top of. You are a terrible woman, he said. I know. I love you anyway. I know. Aria. I love you too, Lucien, obviously. Don't be stupid. They married 2 years later. It was not a wedding, really. It was a lunch. In the courtyard. Under the lemon tree. Aria's mother flew in. It was the first time she had left Oregon in 9 years. And she cried getting off the plane. And she cried hugging Ethan. And she cried meeting Lucien. Not out of sadness, she kept insisting, just out of being 65, which she said as if 65 were a medical condition she had recently been diagnosed with. She stayed 2 weeks. She taught Sophia how to make biscuits the way Aria's grandmother had made them. And Sophia, who had not taken a cooking lesson from anyone in 40 years, accepted the instruction with a straight-faced grace that suggested she understood that this was not about biscuits. When Aria's mother flew home, she had a tan, 3 kilograms more weight than she had arrived with, and a small framed painting of the lemon tree that Elena had given her. And she did not stop calling the house our house on the coast for the rest of her life, even after she had only been to it twice. Ethan was 9 at the wedding. He walked Aria across the courtyard. It was his idea. Lucien did not wear a tie. Aria wore a white cotton dress that she had bought in the village and that had cost less than a good dinner in the city she used to live in. Sophia cried. Pellegrini cried and pretended he wasn't. Pietro, who had flown in for the weekend, made a toast in Italian that Aria did not understand, but that Elena translated quietly for her afterwards. And when Aria heard what he had said, she understood, for the first time, the full weight of what it had cost the men in Lucien's old life to let him have this new one. He gave them permission, she thought later that night, lying awake with her new husband asleep beside her. They let him go, and in exchange he gave them his silence, and they gave him in exchange that lunch in the courtyard. That was the whole bargain. It is never going to be spoken again.
And it is the best bargain he has ever made. Their daughter was born the following spring. They named her Maggie. It was Lucian who suggested it.
Aria had been thinking of names for months. She had been thinking of them,
Really, since the first ultrasound. And she had not dared to say the one that had been in her head the whole time, because she had thought it was too much, too heavy, too much of a weight for a baby to carry. She had written a list on a piece of paper of other names. She had showed them to Lucian etched in bed one night, in her 7th month. He had read the list. He had handed it back to her. He had said, "These are good, but I think her name is Maggie."
"Lucien, is it not?"
Yes, it is. But it's a lot. It is not too much. It might be too much.
It is not. I have thought about it. Your sister loved you very much. Her name is not a weight. Her name is an invitation. Someone has to keep saying it out loud. I do not think your sister would want the people who loved her to be afraid to say her name. I think she would want it used on someone good, someone new. Aria had cried then, which she almost never did anymore. The baby was Maggie. Ethan, at 9, adored her with a ferocity that scared Aria a little. He had been a watchful child for his whole life, and now he had something to watch that was entirely his, and he treated his little sister as if she were a small, unexplained miracle that had been left on their doorstep and could be taken away at any moment. He read to her at 3 months old. He sang to her at 5. When she started to walk, he hovered behind her with his hands out, not touching her, the way a man hovers behind a glass vase on the edge of a table. "She's not going to break, baby," Aria told him once from the kitchen doorway, watching. Ethan didn't look up. "I'm just making sure," he said. Ingeten. Years passed the way years pass in a life you did not expect to have. Lucien planted tomatoes, and he was very bad at it the first year, and less bad the second. And by the 5th year, he had a small raised bed in the corner of the courtyard that produced so many tomatoes, Sophia started giving them away to the neighbors in brown paper bags. He learned to make his own coffee in the mornings. He stopped wearing suits. He had Pellegrini cut his hair in the kitchen once a month because he could not bring himself to go to a barber, some old habit he could not shake. And Pellegrini, who had never cut hair in his life, took to it with a surgeon's seriousness and produced, month after month, a perfectly acceptable haircut. Lucien developed, in his late 50s, a bad back, a love of a particular local wine, and an interest in birds, of all things, that Aria teased him about relentlessly until the day she realized he could name every species that passed their cliff in the migrations. And then she stopped teasing and started listening. Aria was the one who surprised herself the most. She had thought in that first year that she would be a woman who lived in a house with a husband and 2 children, and who was kind to the people in the village, and who walked to the market every day, and who would, eventually, be the person her daughter came to with questions about men, and her son came to with questions about money. She thought that would be enough. She thought it would be more than enough. She thought it would be everything she had ever wanted. She had not expected to go back to work. It started small. There was a woman in the village, a young woman, maybe 25, with a bad husband and a small child and nowhere to go. Rosa from the market brought her to Aria's courtyard one afternoon, without warning, the way country people brought each other to each other, and she sat on the stone bench with the young woman and listened. And the young woman did not speak any English, and Aria did not speak enough of the local language to keep up. And they managed anyway, the way women had always managed, with their hands and their eyes and the small shared grammar of a bruise. The young woman slept in the guest room for 6 weeks. When she left, she had papers and a job in another town and a bank account. Aria had arranged it. It had not occurred to her until much later that what she had done was what Lucien had done for her 4 years earlier in a house on the other side of the world. The second woman came 6 months later, then the third, then the fourth. By the time Maggie was 4, there was a small, quiet organization running out of the back room where Lucien used to make his phone calls. It did not have a name. It did not have a website. It had Aria, and a young lawyer from the city who came out once a month, and Elena, who had, over time, without any of them really talking about it, become the person who handled the children of the women who came. It had a small bank account with a quiet and steady flow of money into it, the source of which Aria did not precisely ask about because she had stopped counting years before. One night in bed, when Maggie was 5 and Ethan was 12, Aria turned her head on the pillow and looked at her husband in the dark. "Lucien." "Yes." "Am I a crime boss?" He laughed. It was not as rare a sound from him as it had once been, but it was still a rare enough sound that it always surprised her, a little. "No, my love." "Are you sure?" "You are not a crime boss. I run an underground network of women who are escaping bad situations. I do not use my real name in most of the paperwork. I move money around in ways that I am not 100% sure are technically legal. I have a man in my courtyard once a month who I am pretty sure used to be the sort of person who is pretty sure about what is legal." "Yes." "So am I." "You are a philanthropist." "Lucien." "You are. You are biased." "Yes." "I'm being serious." "So am I." "You are not a crime boss, Aria. A crime boss does a great deal of harm in order to do a little bit of good, sometimes, on the side, for the people they already love. You do a very small amount of paperwork irregularity in order to do a great deal of good for people who have no reason to love you. It is not the same thing. It is the opposite thing. Is that a distinction you were taught, or one you made up just now?" "I made it up just now. I think it is true anyway." "I love you." "I know." She rolled over. She put her head on his chest. After a while, he said, "I used to lie awake in that study for 12 years and look at the photograph of my son. And I used to think, I have ruined everything I loved, and I have been given nothing to replace it. And this is the shape of my life now, and I will live it because I do not deserve to stop. I thought that for 12 years, Aria, every night. I want you to know that. I thought it like a prayer. Lucien, I do not think it anymore. I know you don't. I just wanted to say it out loud, once, in this house. So it had been said in this house. Okay. Aria. Yes. Thank you. For what? For not letting me put the picture back on the shelf and feel nothing." She did not answer. She didn't need to. She lay against him in the dark and listened to his heartbeat under her ear, and outside the window the sea was doing what the sea always did at that hour, which was nothing much. And somewhere down the hall her daughter was asleep with her mouth open, and her son was asleep with a book on his chest, and a house full of people who had also been given a second chance at being alive were sleeping in their own rooms. And the whole thing, which should not have worked, which had no business working, was somehow working and had been working for years. Many years later, after Ethan had grown tall and quiet and kind, and had gone away to a university in the north and come back with a degree in something to do with ocean science that Aria, who had never quite understood what he actually did, nonetheless bragged about at every opportunity. After Maggie had become a teenager with her mother's stubbornness and her father's ability to sit very still and get her way just by waiting. After Sophia had died at 81, in her own bed in this room off the kitchen she had claimed 22 years earlier, and they had buried her in the village cemetery, and Pellegrini had cried so hard Lucien had had to hold him up, and Pellegrini himself had gone 3 years after that, peacefully, in his sleep, with his unfinished memoir in a drawer that Elena later published for him privately in a run of 20 copies, one of which sat on the shelf in the courtyard study next to the old photograph of a boy in a soccer jersey. After Aria's mother had died in Oregon at 84, and Aria had flown home for the first time in 17 years and stood over her mother's grave in a cold drizzle and said, "You did good, Mom. You did good." There came an afternoon late in the autumn when Aria sat on the stone bench in the courtyard with a mug of coffee and watched her grown son push her granddaughter on a swing they had hung from the low branch of the lemon tree. She was 60. Her hair was shot through with silver. Her hands were the hands of a woman who had been planting tomatoes and making soups and typing letters for a very long time, and her back hurt in the mornings, and her knees were not what they had been. She was, by her own quiet reckoning, happier than she had any right to be, and old enough to understand that that was the correct way for a life to end up, with more good in it than you had earned, and a faint private embarrassment about how much of the good had come from people you had not asked for. Lucien came out of the house with his own coffee. He was 71. He moved slower than he had. He had stopped dyeing his hair the year before. It was almost all white now, and it made him look, Aria thought, more like the man he had actually been all along. He sat down next to her on the bench. He did not say anything for a while. They watched Maggie laugh and Ethan push her again, and Maggie's daughter, who was 3 and who had been named Isabella, after a woman in a photograph she would never meet, run across the courtyard chasing a cat that was pretending to be afraid of her.
Aria. Yes. Do you remember the alley? What? The alley. Which alley? The alley.
Oh. Yes. Of course I remember the alley. I think about it sometimes. I don't know why. Lately I have been thinking about it. Lucienne. Yes. What do you think about? I think about how close I came to driving past. You didn't drive past.
No, but I think about it. I think about the kind of night it had been. I think about how tired I was. I think about how many times in my life I had driven past. Do you understand what I am saying?
Yes.
It would have been very easy. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to drive past.
I know. And I did not. No.
And everything, Aria, every single thing that I have, this house, these children, this afternoon, this coffee, the fact that I can say to you the things that I can say to you, every single thing came from that one decision, that one small decision, which was not even a decision really, which was just me being too tired to keep being the man I had been for one more block.
Aria looked at her husband. She looked at the small white scar at the corner of his left eyebrow, which was almost invisible now against the lines around his eye. She looked at his hand on his knee. The old tattoo on his wrist faded down to gray under the skin. She looked at the hand of the man who had, one night a very long time ago, held the hand of the man next to her, and who had at that moment been a dead boy in a photograph, and who was now, she realized with a small clean jolt, also the small boy laughing at the cat across the courtyard, because her grandson was named after him. Matteo, a boy in a soccer jersey who had never scored a goal in his life, until the day he had, and then, in a different house, through different children, was still scoring goals, 50-some years later. She put her hand over her husband's. You have said this to me before, you know. Have I? At least twice a year, for 30 years. I am repetitive in my old age. No, you have always been repetitive. It is only now that I have decided it's one of the things I love about you. You love when I repeat myself. I love when you come back to the same thing, over and over, because I know that as long as you keep coming back to it, you can still feel it. And that was the deal, Lucien, from the beginning. That was the whole deal. You keep taking the picture off the shelf, and I stay on this coast with you. That was the contract. That was the contract. We should have written it down. We did, in a way. Did we? Yes, look around you. She looked around her. She looked at the lemon tree and the olive tree and the stone wall at the edge of the courtyard with the sea beyond it, and her son pushing her daughter on a swing, and her granddaughter chasing a cat, and the light on the stones, and a dish towel that Elena had forgotten on the back of a chair, and that Aria did not, for reasons she did not quite understand, get up to move, and she thought about the young woman she had been, the worn-out waitress in the diner with the neon sign that read OPE. And she thought, that girl would not have believed this. That girl would not have dared. That girl thought her whole life was a pair of hands too tired to unclench, and a child who would not speak, and a man who was going to kill her in a parking lot, and a set of locks that would never hold. That girl could not have imagined the lemon tree. She thought, but that girl did one thing right. She got in the car. She didn't know what kind of car it was. She didn't know where it was going. She didn't know whose hands were on the wheel. She did not know, and she got in anyway. Not because she was brave, because she was too tired to be anything else, and the car was the only car, and the man was the only man, and the choice was not between safe and unsafe, but between one kind of drowning and another, and the car had a heater, and her nephew was cold. She got in, and everything else came from that. She thought, that is the only lesson I have. That is the only thing I know that I did not know 25 years ago. You do not get to be certain when you make the choice that saves your life. You do not get to know. You get to be tired and scared and absolutely out of better ideas,
and you get to reach your hand toward the thing that does not look like your rescue. And you get to, sometimes, if you are lucky, if the world has been paying attention, you get to find out, decades later, sitting on a stone bench in a courtyard, that the thing you reached toward was the thing that opened up your whole life. And you do not get to know that in the moment, ever. That is the deal the world makes with us. That is the whole deal. That is why so many people drive past. She squeezed her husband's hand. Lucien. Yes. I'm glad you didn't drive past. I am too. Me too, what? I am glad I didn't drive past. That's what I said. I know, I was agreeing. It is an old man's tic. I agree too much. You agree exactly the right amount. You're being kind. I am being accurate. I have had a long time to collect data. He laughed. He leaned back against the stone. Across the courtyard, Ethan caught Isabella as she ran past and spun her in a circle, and Maggie jumped off the swing and went to join them. And the three of them, the boy who had not spoken for a year, and the girl named for a sister in a grave, and the little girl named for a woman in a photograph, stood in a pool of late afternoon sun and laughed the particular laugh of people who have no idea yet how much they are loved, because they have always been loved, and they think that is how everyone lives. Aria watched them. Her coffee had gone cold. She didn't care. She leaned her head on her husband's shoulder, and he put his arm around her, and the sun was low, and the sea beyond the wall was doing what the sea always did, which was nothing much, and she thought, for the first time in a very long time, about an alley on a wet morning, and a man in an expensive coat with a black umbrella, and the sound of her own voice years ago asking him why, and his answer. Because I can. It had seemed at the time like not enough of an answer. It turned out in the end that it had been enough. It turned out, she thought, watching her family in the late light, that it had been exactly enough, that it had been the only good answer a person could give in a cold alley, on a cold morning, that it had been the answer every person deserved to hear at least once in their life, and that almost none of them ever did, and that the whole rest of the world, for better and for worse, came down to how many people were willing to say it on how many cold mornings, to how many strangers who had run out of places to go. She closed her eyes. She felt the sun on her face. She was home. She had been home for a long time. She would be home for whatever time was left. And if, on some other morning, in some other city, another tired woman was being dragged across a parking lot by a man who had decided how her night was going to end, and if, somewhere behind them, a car slowed down, Aria hoped, with the whole of the heart she had been given back against every odd of her life, that whoever was driving it would be the kind of person who stopped. Because I can. It was enough. It had always been enough. It always would be.